Hello guys, welcome to Fanfiction Audiobook. Here you find original fan-made audio stories. Enjoy the journey into new worlds.
Dragon Ball. My power level has reached its maximum. Part 1. Age 762. Universe 7, Planet Atlantis. A small spacecraft soared into the sky, kicking up a cloud of dust. Hey, I haven't boarded the spacecraft yet. Zoro flew high into the air, chasing after it rapidly while shouting at the top of his lungs. HMPH, a piece of trash with a combat power of only 200 has no right to ride this prince's spacecraft. Vegeta's voice was cold as he stood by the spacecraft's hatch with his arms crossed, watching with icy indifference. Whoosh! The ship suddenly accelerated, instantly breaking through the atmosphere. Under Zoro's upward gaze, it vanished without a trace. Ah! Zoro woke up with a start, breaking out in a cold sweat. He took a deep breath and then ripped the black blindfold off his eyes. Lord Zoro, did you have another nightmare? Lord Zoro, let your humble servant massage your legs. Two exotic young girls with graceful figures snuggled up beside Zoro, busying themselves with his comfort. Zoro let out a long sigh, remaining silent. 25 years had passed. The scene from 25 years ago was still vivid in his mind. Zoro had transmigrated and become a low-class warrior on planet Vegeta. When he was born, his combat power was only 5. However, Zoro did not leave his fate in the hands of others. Through hard training, by the age of 5, he finally managed to raise his combat power to 200. It was only after actually transmigrating as a Saiyan that Zoro realized how trashy his natural talent and aptitude were. Although Zoro wanted to increase his combat power through gravity training. As a power level 5 weakling, he had no right to have the planet's scientists build him gravity equipment. He watched as Bardock returned and the couple sent Kakarot to Earth. Zoro knew very well that in a month at most, planet Vegeta would be personally destroyed by Frieza. Fortunately, at that time, Vegeta, Raditz, and Nappa were forming a team to go out and fight. With his combat power level of 200, Zoro shamelessly joined their team and escaped the planet's destruction. As a result, when they arrived at planet Atlantis to restock supplies, Zoro had just finished moving the supplies to the ship. Nappa ordered him to go back and bring some more water. Because of his low combat power, Zoro could only serve as a lackey for errands. At that time, Zoro only wanted to go to Earth as quickly as possible. Perhaps by following Master Roshi on Earth and training properly, he could compensate for his lack of talent. In the end, just as Zoro went to get the water, he turned around only to find that the spacecraft had already taken off. Get lost. Trash. Nappa laughed maniacally from the ship. Vegeta also watched coldly with his arms crossed, heartlessly leaving a parting remark. A piece of trash with a combat power of only 200 has no right to ride this prince's spacecraft. Raditz followed up with a taunt. We are all elite warriors, a low-class warrior like you shouldn't come out and embarrass us. Then, the spacecraft soared into the sky, leaving Zoro behind on planet Atlantis. Planet Atlantis was a planet with an ancient civilization, somewhat similar to Earth's ancient periods. The humans on the planet, aside from having pointed ears, 2 cat ears, and a fluffy tail, were almost no different from Earthlings in all other aspects. As a Dragon Ball fan, Zoro remembered that in the Dragon Ball world, anyone with pointed ears seemed to have come from the demon realm. So, the humans on planet Atlantis probably migrated from the demon realm. However, the combat power of the humans on this planet was truly average. It was remarkable if the highest reached 100. And even the person with a combat power of 100, besides possessing somewhat abnormal strength, could not fly and did not understand cultivation methods. With his combat power of 200, Zoro quickly became a god-like existence on this planet. Because the planet was in its ancient era, technology had not yet been born. Therefore, without a spacecraft, Zoro had no way to leave this planet. Before he knew it, 25 years had flashed by. Now, Zoro's combat power had increased from the previous 200 to 1000. This increase in combat power was truly too slow. Calculating the time, Vegeta's combat power should be around 18,000 now, right? Son Goku's combat power seemed to be 8,000, and with the Kaioken activated, his combat power would definitely exceed 10,000. He was far behind. But, sometimes Zoro thought that living on this planet was actually a pretty good choice. Planet Atlantis had almost no useful resources, so it wouldn't be targeted by the Frieza force. Even the villainous figures in the universe couldn't be bothered to visit this planet. That was why, in 25 years, not even a single spacecraft had landed. However, Zoro felt very unhappy in his heart. Since he had transmigrated to the Dragon Ball world, if he didn't go and interact with Son Goku and the others, or even punch Supreme Kais and kick gods of destruction later on, it would be such a waste. Then what did I come to the Dragon Ball world for? Just to play with these exotic little beauties all day. But Zoro wasn't content to maintain the status quo. Through his efforts, planet Atlantis had already developed steam engines and electrical technology, successfully pushing the entire planet through the first and second industrial revolutions. But it was still 108,000 miles away from space travel. Zoro gave a long sigh and looked up at the purple sky, lost in thought for a moment. The two exotic little beauties were also constantly massaging Zoro's shoulders, back, and legs, keeping themselves busy. Having grown accustomed to a leisurely life, Zoro truly wanted to venture out into the universe and experience this magnificent Dragon Ball world in its prime. Only, what could he do with this bit of combat power once he left? Wouldn't he just be a weakling getting bullied by others? Just as Zoro was fantasizing about stepping on Vegeta and competing with Frieza on planet Namek. Lord Zoro is so amazing. You can guess the color of the clothes we're wearing underneath even while blindfolded. Let's keep playing, Lord Zoro. Quick, guess what color my bodice is. Lord Zoro actually fell asleep just now. Are you that uninterested in the color of my bodice? The two exotic little beauties leaned into Zoro's ear, their breath like orchids. They picked up the black blindfold from earlier and were about to put it back on him. No more playing, no more playing. Zoro waved his hand, feeling a bit bored. This was a miraculous skill that Zoro had activated a year ago. This skill refreshed punctually at 12 p.m. on the first day of every month. After refreshing, the previous skill would be overridden by the new one. However, these skills were almost of no great use to Zoro. Over the course of a year, the skills were fishing, cooking, flight, fireball technique, flash technique, dancing, water control, tailoring, bandaging, cooking enhancement, flight enhancement, and X-ray vision. 12 months in a year, 12 skills. And the result of these skills. Especially the flight skill in the third month, it was simply too much. I already knew how to fly, alright. After activating the flight skill, Zoro felt that his speed wasn't much different from before, just a tiny bit faster. Last month's flight enhancement skill was actually quite good. His flight speed increased by at least twofold. The problem was, with only 1000 combat power, even if his speed doubled, it still wasn't very useful. Then there were the tailoring and bandaging skills, they were even more ridiculous than the flight skill. I'm a Saiyan, and you're giving me tailoring skills. The only one that Zoro was relatively interested in was the cooking skill. For this reason, Zoro specially cooked a table of sumptuous delicacies and shouted Whis' name loudly, hoping to attract him. If he could follow Whis to planet Beerus to cultivate, it would be a shortcut in life. Maybe he could even directly unlock Super Saiyan God. As it turned out, things didn't go as planned. Whis didn't show up. In the 10th month, Zoro rolled the cooking enhancement skill and once again prepared a large table of sumptuous food. Whis still didn't show up. Was the food cooked with this skill not delicious enough, or did Whis simply not hear him? However, the food cooked with this cooking enhancement skill was indeed much more delicious than the last time. It was even a bit better than the level of the royal chefs on this planet. In the final month, Zoro rolled the X-ray vision skill. Having nothing to do, he spent quite some time teasing the young beauties around him. But after using this skill a lot, it started to feel a bit boring. Besides, Zoro wasn't short of beautiful women. Furthermore, these skills refreshed every week, and once they refreshed, the previous skill would disappear. Skills that couldn't be kept were essentially useless. Even if he rolled a skill that increased combat power by 5,000 times, if the skill disappeared the next month, wouldn't all that excitement be for nothing? Calculating the time, today happened to be the start of the month. What skill would be refreshed this month? Currently, there was less than a minute left until 12 p.m. Zoro's face was full of anticipation. Time quickly reached 12 p.m. Zoro felt a jolt through his whole body, and his sleepiness vanished instantly. Skill refresh. Combat power x 50. Combat power times 50. Isn't this the same multiplier as activating Super Saiyan? Wahahaha. My current combat power is 1000. If my combat power increases by 50 times, wouldn't that be 50,000? Well, although it's a bit low, it's enough to pin Vegeta to the ground and give him a good thrashing. Is my combat power 50,000 now? Zoro muttered to himself. The next moment, Zoro suddenly glared at a rockery in the distance. Boom! Accompanied by an earth-shattering roar, that 10-meter-high rockery was instantly blown to smithereens. The two young beauties were scared out of their wits and hurriedly threw themselves into Zoro's arms. Zoro's eyes widened as he also stared blankly at the shattered rockery, his face filled with astonishment. That was the strength unleashed just by a glare. If I were to use a full power strike, maybe the entire planet would be blown to pieces. One must know that previously, with Zoro's 1000 combat power, he didn't even have the ability to destroy this planet. At most, he could destroy a planet as small as the moon. Of course, Zoro wouldn't go around destroying planets for no reason. Now that Zoro had the combat power X50 skill, he felt like he could finally take off. Going to Earth to settle the score with that fellow Vegeta would be a pretty good choice. Just as Zoro was thinking this, he suddenly noticed two circular slots in the bottom right of his vision. These two slots were translucent and didn't obstruct his vision at all. One of the slots contained the combat power X50 skill, which also had a passive skill label on it. The icon was circular, looking very much like skill icons in a video game. The other slot was empty. In addition, skills that had been refreshed in the past, such as fishing, cooking, flight, fireball technique, flash technique, dancing, water control technique, tailoring, bandaging, cooking enhancement, flight enhancement, and X-ray vision, had all turned into skill icons. These skill icons were floating randomly in the air. Zoro rubbed his chin, then chose the flash technique skill and placed it into the transparent slot. Snap! Flash technique fit tightly into the slot, and the words, active skill, thoughtfully appeared. Zoro didn't hesitate and directly used his consciousness to activate the flash technique skill. That was so scary just now. Lord Zoro, do you think my eyes look pretty? Today I specifically put on colored contacts the way you described. And mine. I've also put on colored contacts. The two exotic young beauties huddled around Zoro, speaking as they bounced up and down. Right then, a blinding light suddenly burst from Zoro's body. Ah, my eyes! The two young beauties cried out repeatedly, hurriedly covering their eyes. Zoro. Zoro was somewhat speechless. Why did you have to ask me to look at your eyes right at this moment? I really didn't do it on purpose. Zoro had used this flash technique skill before. He felt it shared a similar purpose with the solar flare. Moreover, flash technique was more convenient to use than the solar flare. Using the solar flare required the sun. But flash technique could flash even at night. The skill activated instantly with no cooldown and could be used infinitely. In other words, Zoro could completely use this skill to light up the entire night. That month, Zoro acted as a guiding light for a long time at night, and even thoughtfully provided lighting for the women's bathhouse. So that was also why Zoro chose to keep this skill in the slot without hesitation. Moreover, with this skill, even if he couldn't beat someone, he could still manage to slip away. This was a miraculous skill equivalent to the solar flare. Back then, Cell used the solar flare at least twice to absorb the androids. The moment Zoro placed the flash technique skill into the slot, the other skills instantly turned into starlight and vanished without a trace. It seems that after a year, I can use two skills. One is flash technique, and the other is combat power X50. Zoro felt delighted. Perhaps after another year of refreshing, there will be a few more skill slots. 3 days later, Zoro had gradually adapted to the special power brought by his 50,000 combat power. As expected of 50,000 combat power, it gave Zoro the feeling that the energy he had cultivated before was simply too low. This was a 50-fold increase in one breath. When I go to Earth, I'll have to get Bulma to make me some gravity training equipment. Zoro had just finished today's cultivation when he suddenly caught a glimpse of a fireball streaking across the distant sky. Is that a spaceship? High in the sky, a fireball was whistling down toward the ground below. Zoro took a closer look and immediately beamed with joy. Isn't that one of those spherical spaceships from the Frieza Force? Just as I obtained a decent skill, a spaceship arrives. My luck is truly fantastic. The spaceship was plummeting at high speed toward the city near the royal palace. Looking at the situation, if the ship landed, at least half of the city near the palace would be destroyed. The king and his subjects in the palace were all scared witless, staring blankly at the fireball falling from the sky. Whoosh! Zoro immediately soared into the sky, quickly reaching the position of the spaceship. Smack! Zoro waved his hands toward the spaceship from a distance, and a powerful energy enveloped it. The spaceship immediately changed direction, somersaulting several times in the air before falling toward the distant wasteland. Long live Lord Sorrow! Long live Lord Sorrow! Long live Lord Sorrow. The subjects cheered loudly, their shouts echoing continuously. Zoro waved to the many subjects and then flew quickly toward the spaceship. Crash. The spaceship fell from the sky, slammed into the ground below, and rolled a few more times before slowly coming to a halt. Creak. The spaceship hatch opened, and an alien that looked like a frog stepped out. The alien wore a Frieza Force battle armor, a scouter over his eye, and held an energy gun in his hand. The moment the frog alien stepped out of the spaceship, he immediately locked his gaze on Zoro. Combat power of 1000. The frog alien was slightly stunned, a bit surprised, then gave a contemptuous smile. I really didn't expect that such a worthless planet would actually have someone with a combat power of 1000. Zoro was taken aback. So the skill given by the system makes it so the scouter can't detect the accurate combat power value. So, this 50-fold combat power wasn't detected by the scouter. What is your combat power? Zoro asked with interest. I'm afraid it'll scare you to death, but my combat power is 2000. The frog alien grinned triumphantly. 1000 higher than mine, how impressive. Zoro marveled, genuinely feeling full of admiration. A tail. You actually have a tail. The frog alien suddenly noticed the tail behind Zoro, squinting his eyes to examine him closely. You're not a native of this planet. Could it be that, you're a Saiyan? Zoro didn't waste any words, he suddenly reached out his hand, aiming it at the frog alien's scouter from a distance. Instantly, a burst of invisible energy shot out from Zoro's hand and acted upon the scouter. Snap! In just an instant, the scouter the frog alien was wearing flew off his face and landed straight in Zoro's hand. It's been a long time since I've seen one of these. Zoro sighed deeply, then silently examined the scouter in his hand. You, give that scouter back to me. The frog alien grew anxious and shouted angrily. Let's have a proper contest, the two of us. Zoro said with a smile, tossing the scouter aside. You, what did you say? You want to challenge me? The frog alien was suddenly amused. Your combat power is only 1000. Are you sure you want to do something so foolish? Swish. Zoro didn't waste any more words. With a flicker, he vanished from his spot and instantly appeared behind the frog alien. Thud. Zoro delivered a hand chop, striking heavily against the back of the frog alien's neck. The frog alien's eyes bulged, bubbles continuously escaping his mouth, followed by a large spray of blood as his whole body twitched uncontrollably. Looking at the situation, it seemed he wouldn't survive. Sorry about that, I've become too strong. I didn't know that strike just now would be so powerful. Zoro said somewhat apologetically to the frog alien. Frog alien. The frog alien opened his mouth, but couldn't say a word. The injury seems very serious, I doubt you'll make it. Do you have any last words? Zoro crouched down and asked the frog alien with concern. You. The frog alien's eyes bulged with rage, fuming with anger. You probably don't know yet, but your Saiyan home, planet Vegeta, was destroyed long ago. Almost all the Saiyans are dead. After saying this, the frog alien looked at Zoro gloatingly, hoping to regain some face. I know about that. Wasn't it that fellow Frieza who destroyed our planet? Then he claimed to the outside world that it was hit by a giant meteor. Zoro was unfazed and finally remarked, you really are a good frog. Traveling all this way just to tell me this, I thank you. The frog alien's mouth twitched, and he stopped talking, having suffered internal emotional damage. By the way, what are you doing here? Zoro asked with a smile. HMPH. The frog alien turned his head away, no longer wanting to pay attention to Zoro. Speak properly, and I feel like your injury might still be treatable, Zoro said with a smile. Hearing that his injury might be treatable, the frog alien immediately breathed a sigh of relief and hurriedly said, I am a scout for the Frieza Force, responsible for scouting various planets in the universe. On the surface, this planet doesn't seem to have any useful value. But as a scout, I needed to conduct a field inspection. So, what were the results of your investigation? Zoro smiled and asked. This planet could easily be turned into a waste disposal plant, and the humans on it could become slaves responsible for handling space trash. The frog alien replied. Recently, Lord Frieza has been very concerned about environmental greening and says he wants to implement waste sorting. Zoro was also speechless at Frieza's bizarre move. Frieza, you actually want to do waste sorting? Are you kidding me? Bam! Zoro didn't hold back and struck again with his palm, killing the frog alien instantly. You want to turn planet Atlantis into a waste disposal plant. In your dreams. To Zoro, this place was already his home. There were at least 100 exotic beauties at home. Zoro of course wouldn't let Frieza have his way. The next moment, Zoro waved his hand toward the frog alien again, and a powerful energy enveloped him. Boom! The frog alien was instantly blasted into smithereens by Zoro, deader than dead. Having dealt with the frog alien, Carlos came to the spaceship's location, skillfully opened the hatch, and took a careful look inside. Not bad. This spaceship is perfectly usable. Am I finally leaving? My 100 exotic beauties. You'll miss me, right? 2 days later. Planet Atlantis, Temple Square. A large group of lively cat-eared beauties came to see Zoro off. Their eyes were red, some bowed their heads and fidgeted with the hems of their clothes, some bit their lips to hold back tears, and others hugged each other, sobbing softly. Lord Zoro, can't you stay? Are you not having fun here? Yeah. Lord Zoro even said he would give me a proper physical exam. How can you go back on your word? Lord Zoro, we can't bear to let you go. Lord Zoro, what will we do once you leave? As they spoke, the young beauties began to cry one after another, constantly wiping away their tears. Zoro stood where he was, surrounded by them. He looked around at the faces he had lived with day and night for 25 years, feeling a lump in his throat. At this moment, even Zoro's expression showed a hint of emotion. He truly felt a bit reluctant to leave this planet. This place was essentially his home. Xiao Yi, Xiao Xiao San. Xiao Yi Bai. Zoro took a deep breath, stepped forward, and opened his arms. Once I finish what I have to do, I'll come back for you. He gave each of the young beauties a warm hug. Some of the girls buried their faces in his chest, trembling and crying too hard to speak. Some girls grabbed the hem of his clothes and refused to let go. Even when he gently pried their fingers away, they would immediately grab on again. Others stole a kiss on his cheek before blushing and hiding behind the crowd. An hour later, Zoro finally boarded the spherical mini spaceship. Standing at the hatch, he took one last look at the temple where he had lived for 25 years and at the cat-eared beauties who were still waving and wiping away tears. The interior of the spaceship had been tidied up by the girls. It had been disinfected, covered with soft carpets, and they had thoughtfully placed several changes of clothes and handmade snacks in the corner. To Zoro, the spaceship felt a bit like home. He took a deep breath, sat at the main console, and pressed the start button. Swoosh! The spaceship instantly broke through the planet's atmosphere. The powerful G-force pressed Zoro into his seat as the sky outside the window changed from purple to deep blue, and then to pitch black. The ship shot into the vastness of space at incredible speed. Zoro turned his head and looked through the observation window at the shrinking planet Atlantis. The purple planet was becoming smaller and farther away in his field of vision. His gaze gradually sharpened. I must become stronger. This planet still needs me to protect it. There, 100 family members are waiting for my return. Zoro calmed his emotions and then quickly began operating the main console. A minute later. Swoosh! The spaceship changed its orientation, tracing an arc across the vast starry sky as it sped toward Earth. The screen on the main console showed that it would take at least 10 days to reach Earth from here. With nothing to do, Zoro had no choice but to lie down and enter a state of sleep. But he didn't actually fall asleep. After closing his eyes, he could clearly feel the surging ki within his body. The passive skill Combat Power X50 had completely fused with his body, flowing through every vein like blood. 50,000 combat power. It wasn't considered strong, but it was enough to grind Vegeta into the dirt. The corners of Zoro's mouth curled up slightly as he slowly drifted off to sleep. Time passed like a fleeting shadow, gone in the blink of an eye. Day 10. Zoro opened his eyes. Through the observation window, he saw the blue planet that couldn't be more familiar. Azure oceans, white clouds, and emerald continents. Earth. Here I come. Zoro narrowed his eyes, a smile playing on his lips. I wonder if Vegeta has arrived on Earth yet. A surge of anticipation and excitement welled up within him. Zoro rubbed his hands together and began piloting the ship to descend into Earth's atmosphere. Earth, a certain wasteland region. A fierce battle had just taken place here. The ground was blasted with several deep craters, and rubble was scattered everywhere. Several corpses lay haphazardly among the debris. Tien Shinhan, Xiaosu, Yamcha. Several of Earth's warriors had already died. Now, only Krillin, Piccolo, and Gohan remained alive. Son Goku was still on his way. Piccolo hovered in midair, his expression becoming increasingly grave. Veins bulged on his forehead, and cold sweat trickled down from his temples. He gritted his teeth tightly, his gaze locked onto the enemy across from him. Krillin also assumed a fighting stance, legs slightly apart and fists clenched in front of him. But his body was trembling. Not from the cold, but from fear. That instinctive fear from the depths of one's marrow when facing an invincible enemy. The person opposite them was none other than Nappa. Nappa hovered in the air with his arms crossed, looking down on them with a contemptuous smirk. Let's take the fight to the ground, Piccolo whispered, his eyes never leaving the enemy. He's better suited for aerial combat than we are. Krillin glanced back at Piccolo and gave a slight nod. Swoosh. Without a moment's hesitation, the two immediately descended from the sky and landed on the ground. The moment his feet touched solid ground, Krillin felt a bit more secure. HMPH, Nappa let out a contemptuous laugh. It's the same wherever you go, nothing but a futile struggle. With that, Nappa moved, diving down from the sky. His body tore through the air, creating a sharp whistling sound and bringing a violent pressure down toward Piccolo and Krillin. He's coming. Krillin cried out, instinctively taking half a step back. Piccolo clenched his fists tightly, his knuckles cracking. He bared his teeth, his expression exceptionally heavy. Daddy. Gohan was so scared he covered his eyes, not daring to look. Seeing Nappa getting closer and closer to Piccolo and Krillin. 10 meters. 5 meters. 3 meters. The pressure grew heavier and heavier, making it almost impossible for Krillin to breathe. Just then, Nappa, wait. Vegeta, who was watching from the sidelines, suddenly shouted. Nappa was stunned for a moment. Then, he immediately slammed on the brakes in midair. An airwave exploded in front of him, and his body came to a steady halt in midair, less than 2 meters away from Piccolo and Krillin. Piccolo's pupils constricted. Krillin was also startled, cold sweat dripping from the tip of his nose. Hearing Vegeta speak, Krillin and Piccolo immediately turned to look in his direction. Nappa also turned his gaze toward Vegeta in confusion. Vegeta stood calmly in place with his hands on his hips, his chin slightly raised and a haughty smile on his lips. That kind of smile was like an adult watching a group of ants crawling at their feet. What is it? Vegeta, why did you stop me? Nappa asked curiously, a hint of dissatisfaction in his voice. Don't be in such a rush. Vegeta raised the corner of his mouth. I have some questions to ask them. What questions? Nappa looked puzzled. He scratched his bald head and frowned. What is there to talk about with a bunch of trash? Krillin and Piccolo both remained silent, feeling the situation becoming increasingly dire. They exchanged a glance, seeing the same thought in each other's eyes. This big guy is already very strong. But that short one looks even stronger than him. Otherwise, this big guy wouldn't be so obedient. Is the Son Goku you're talking about Kakarot? Vegeta asked with a smile, hands on his hips. Yes. Krillin gritted his teeth and answered truthfully. So what? Just as I heard on the scouter. Vegeta held up his index finger and shook it. He was resurrected using the Dragon Ball, is that what you mean? After speaking, he burst into a fit of crazy laughter. Ha ha ha. So the savior you were counting on is Kakarot. Neither Krillin nor Piccolo made a sound. Krillin clenched his fists, his nails digging into his palms. Piccolo's gaze was gloomy as he stared intently at Vegeta's every move. A piece of trash who couldn't even beat Raditz. Vegeta smiled contemptuously. What's the point even if he comes? Goku is not the same as before. Krillin held his left fist in front of him and shouted, his voice trembling slightly with excitement. He must have become much stronger. You won't be able to beat Son Goku. Piccolo also shouted in a low voice. Ha ha ha. Nappa laughed coldly. Then why doesn't he come and try? Is it because he was too scared and already ran away? He will come. Gohan gritted his teeth, poked half his body out from behind Piccolo, and mustered his courage to shout, my dad will definitely come. He will definitely come to deal with you. He he he. Vegeta was suddenly amused and revealed a bright smile. Interesting. He tilted his head, his gaze sweeping over Krillin, Piccolo, and Gohan one by one. Fine, we'll wait until he gets here. What? Nappa got impatient and demanded loudly. Vegeta, what kind of joke are you playing? That guy won't come. He clenched his fists, his aura surging all over his body. Don't do anything stupid. Nappa shouted angrily. Just let me get rid of them quickly. We'll only wait 3 hours. Vegeta slowly held up 3 fingers and chuckled. After that, we won't wait. 3 hours. Nappa felt increasingly annoyed and shouted angrily. What are we supposed to do for 3 hours? We've been sleeping until today, and we're itching to fight. Waiting is meaningless. As he spoke, Nappa moved, preparing to attack. He kicked his feet in the air, leaned his body forward, and pulled his arms back. A violent aura gathered in his palms. How truly stupid. Nappa shouted in a low voice. I'm going to play a game. Nappa ignored Vegeta and intended to launch a fatal blow at the 3 of them. Nappa. Vegeta suddenly raised his voice and shouted coldly. Are you not listening to me anymore? Nappa's body suddenly stiffened. Ah! Nappa suddenly realized something and slammed on the brakes in midair again. This time the stop was even more violent than the last, and the air in front of him exploded into a visible ripple. Nappa's face turned deathly pale instantly. Piccolo below was also startled, his pupils shrinking. He felt the pressure emanating from Vegeta. It wasn't aimed at them, it was just a casual remark. But that pressure had already scared Nappa like this. I'm sorry. Nappa hurriedly apologized to Vegeta, cold sweat dripping from his forehead. I lost control of myself for a moment. That will be all. Vegeta withdrew his gaze and looked back at Krillin and the others, a smile curling at the corner of his mouth. I've extended your lifespan, you should thank me. Krillin didn't speak, just stared intently at Vegeta. Thank him. What a joke. The battle between the two sides paused there. Vegeta also found a rock and slowly sat down. He crossed one leg over the other, folded his arms, leaned his back against the rock, narrowed his eyes, and patiently waited for Son Goku's arrival. Nappa also descended from the air, stood beside Vegeta, folded his arms, and stared at the three people opposite him with a look of extreme annoyance. Piccolo, Krillin, and Gohan gathered together, letting out a temporary sigh of relief. I'm sorry. Gohan stammered, keeping his head down, not daring to look at Piccolo. Because I was scared. I didn't. Get lost. Piccolo scolded impatiently. What use is a coward like you? You failed to live up to my expectations. Don't say that, Piccolo. Krillin quickly persuaded. After all, Gohan is participating in a battle for the first time. Piccolo snorted, turned his head, and said nothing more. I say, Vegeta. Nappa scratched his bald head and asked in a low voice. Why wait for Kakarot? Because he is a traitor to us Saiyans. As Vegeta said this, he casually picked up the scouter from the ground and put it on his ear. The scouter gave a soft beep, and several sets of data popped up on the screen. Vegeta glanced at it and chuckled. This traitor must be eliminated. He paused, the smile on his lips turning cold. First, I want to kill his son and companions right in front of him. Then I will slowly deal with him, let him be unable to resist, and struggle in pain. In 3 or 4 hours today, we can open a hell exhibition. So that's it. Nappa was filled with excitement and rubbed his hands. That's great, Vegeta. Within 3 hours. Vegeta raised the corner of his mouth. If he comes, that's what we'll do. I'll leave Kakarot to you. Nappa licked his lips and turned his gaze to the three people in the distance, Krillin and the others. I'll deal with the other three. Suit yourself. Vegeta snorted. But don't forget about making that Namekian cough up the Dragon Ball. Don't worry. Nappa patted his chest, becoming even more expectant. I hope Kakarot can come. Speaking of this, he scratched his head again, suddenly thinking of something. But come to think of it, Vegeta. Nappa mused. Speaking of Saiyans, haven't we forgotten about another guy? Who? Vegeta raised an eyebrow. Zoro. Nappa smiled. That guy who is a low-class warrior just like Kakarot. Oh. Vegeta chuckled and narrowed his eyes. I would have forgotten that guy if you hadn't mentioned him. He stretched, his tone casual. After we finish dealing with things on Earth, we'll stop by. Vegeta couldn't quite remember the name of the planet where Zoro was, so he frowned and thought about it. It seems to be called Planet Atlantis. Nappa thought for a moment and replied. Right, Atlantis. Vegeta nodded slightly. I remember now. Even though he's not very useful, Nappa sighed, the remaining Saiyans can be counted on one hand. Bring him over, Vegeta snorted. Let him serve as our logistics. He'll surely be grateful, Nappa laughed. That planet's technology is mediocre, not even as high as Earth's. I'm afraid he'd be trapped on that planet forever without being able to get out. The two shared a smile. 3 hours passed in a flash. The sun moved from overhead to the west. Goku still hadn't arrived. Time's up. Vegeta snorted coldly, stood up from the rock, and patted the dust off his clothes. Waiting any longer is useless. He tilted his head, his cold gaze sweeping over Krillin and the other two. That coward Kakarot isn't coming. My dad is not a coward. Gohan shouted loudly, his small face flushed red. This is bad. Krillin's face fell as his legs went weak. Why hasn't Goku arrived yet? He turned to look at the distant sky, then at Piccolo. Piccolo didn't speak, only gritting his teeth tightly. Fine. Nappa stepped forward, clenching his fists until his knuckles cracked. He sighed, a hint of regret in his voice. It's a shame Kakarot isn't here. I'm going to die, Krillin said with a trembling voice, looking like he was about to cry. I don't even have a girlfriend yet. There's only a slim hope of winning, Piccolo said in a low voice. That is, if we succeed. Krillin and Gohan immediately turned to look at Piccolo. A flicker of hope ignited in their eyes. First, Piccolo whispered, keeping an eye on Nappa and Vegeta's positions from the corner of his eye, Krillin will distract him. Krillin swallowed hard and nodded. Then I will take the chance to grab the Saiyan's weakness, his tail. Piccolo continued. Alright, Krillin took a deep breath and reluctantly agreed. While he's unable to struggle, Piccolo told Gohan, Gohan, attack him with everything you've got. Why yes. Gohan nodded repeatedly, clearly terrified. His small fists were clenched and still shaking. However, he still summoned the courage to speak. I won't run away this time, don't worry. Piccolo looked down at Gohan and said solemnly, just remember that the fate of the earth is in your hands. Gohan looked up, his lips moving, but no words came out. After a pause, Piccolo took a deep breath, his voice lowering with a rare hint of softness. Gohan, as long as you have confidence and the courage to fight, your power is even greater than mine. Gohan's mouth twitched, his Adam's apple bobbed, and his heart pounded so hard it felt like it would leap out of his chest. I don't want to fight. I want to be a great scholar. But he didn't say it aloud, only clenching his fists tightly. All right, Krillin shouted, slamming his fists together. Let's do this. He clenched his fists tight, legs slightly bent, ki gathering at the soles of his feet. His gaze was locked onto Nappa, ready to rush forward and distract him. However, right at that moment, swoosh, a fireball suddenly appeared high in the sky. It dived toward the ground at extreme speed, trailing a long white wake behind it. The fireball stood out vividly against the blue sky, looking like a burning meteor. Vegeta looked up, squinting at the sky. Nappa also stopped advancing, tilting his head back to follow the fireball with his eyes. Krillin, Gohan, and Piccolo obviously noticed the fireball as well, and all looked up at the sky. A spaceship. Nappa was startled, scratching his bald head. Isn't that a Frieza Force spaceship? Vegeta narrowed his eyes, staring at the fireball in the distance, his lips curling downward. Is it one of Frieza's people? Vegeta. Nappa frowned, turning to ask Vegeta, does Frieza know we came to Earth? Did we fail to report our trip to Earth to Frieza? HMPH. Vegeta snorted coldly, his chin tilting up slightly. There was no need. He raised his hand and pressed the button on the side of his scouter. A string of data flashed across the scouter's screen. What's the combat power of the guy who arrived? Nappa hurried over to ask. Only 1000. Vegeta glanced at the screen, a contemptuous smile playing on his lips. Probably just a grunt sent to scout the way. Combat power of 1000. Nappa's interest was piqued. He rubbed his hands together, revealing a cruel smile. That's hilarious. Should I just wipe him out? Let's see first. Vegeta thought for a moment, crossing his arms as his gaze fell back on the descending fireball. Piccolo, Krillin, and Gohan were also staring blankly at the spaceship that was about to land. Krillin swallowed and lowered his voice. That looks like a Saiyan spaceship. He turned to Piccolo, his eyes filled with unease. Could there be other Saiyans besides those two? No. Piccolo shook his head slowly, his eyes fixed on the ship. Judging by their expressions, the person coming shouldn't be a Saiyan. He paused. I suspect the only Saiyans left are you few. Even if it's not a Saiyan, Krillin's face grew even paler. Judging by the style of the spaceship, they're probably with that lot. This is really bad. After a brief moment of daze, Krillin's eyes darted around. He suddenly lowered his voice and whispered into Piccolo's ear, Piccolo, that guy is watching the spaceship land right now. Why don't we take the chance to grab his tail? It's no use. Piccolo shook his head slowly, his gaze never leaving Nappa and Vegeta. Doing that now would only alert them. Rumble. In the next moment, the spaceship Zoro was landed on the ground nearby. Hot air blasted from the bottom of the ship, kicking up clouds of dust. The ground shook violently, and gravel rolled everywhere, pushed by the air currents. Once the dust settled, a large crater was left in the ground. Creak. The spaceship's hatch opened, and white mist billowed out from the gaps. Zoro stepped out from the ship. He stepped onto the uneven ground, looked up at the unfamiliar sky, and took a deep breath. Then, he slowly flew up into the air. Glancing around, Zoro immediately sensed several powerful auras nearby. The ability to sense ki was something Zoro had developed himself when he had nothing better to do. This ability was not difficult. As long as one mastered the technique, it was easy to achieve. After all, Vegeta had only come to Earth once and learned how to sense ki in a very short time. Zoro hovered in midair, his gaze sweeping across the wasteland, and he quickly locked onto the source of those few ki signatures. The corners of his mouth turned up slightly. They arrived at just the right time. This is simply perfect. Whoosh. Zoro moved, turning into a streak of light. The air exploded into a shockwave behind him as he flew at high speed to Vegeta and Nappa, landing steadily a few steps away from them. It is worth mentioning that the Saiyan battle armor he wore when he first went to planet Atlantis had become a bit too small as he grew older. Since then, Zoro had ordered a set of white clothing to be made. Wearing this outfit, Zoro looked dashing, his clothes fluttering gently in the wind. Zoro's sudden appearance left both Vegeta and Nappa a bit stunned. After all, the two sides hadn't seen each other for over 20 years. Vegeta and Nappa had long forgotten what Zoro looked like. But Zoro remembered exactly what Vegeta and Nappa looked like. He stood there, watching the two of them with a calm gaze. However, soon enough, Vegeta and Nappa noticed the tail swaying slightly behind Zoro. A brown tail was swaying gently behind him. That was the most obvious mark of a Saiyan. A Saiyan. Nappa was slightly taken aback, looking Zoro up and down. You are a Saiyan. Oh. Vegeta was a little surprised, raising an eyebrow and looking at Zoro with interest. I really didn't expect that there would be another surviving Saiyan besides us. He tilted his head. What is your name? Zoro. Zoro stated his name, a faint, almost imperceptible smile on his lips. Hearing Zoro say his name, Vegeta and Nappa were slightly stunned. They looked at each other. 3 hours ago, the two of us were just talking about you. And here you are, running over to find us yourself. This is really quite unexpected. The faces of Piccolo, Krillin, and Gohan turned increasingly pale. Krillin felt his legs go weak, and cold sweat dripped from his forehead down to the tip of his nose. Gohan hid behind Piccolo, his small hands clutching tightly onto Piccolo's cape. How did another Saiyan appear? And it looks like this Saiyan is here to help Vegeta and Nappa. This is really terrible. It's okay. Piccolo lowered his voice and let out a long sigh of relief. This person's ki doesn't seem very strong, it feels even weaker than Raditz. Really? Krillin's eyes lit up, setting his mind at ease for the moment. That's great. However, when his gaze fell back on Nappa and Vegeta, his heart tightened again. Gohan was so scared that the corners of his mouth twitched and his throat tightened, as if someone were choking him. Although his combat power is only 1000, there are 3 of them. Gohan had originally thought they had the numbers advantage, but now the numbers were equal to the other side. How did you find us? Vegeta glanced sideways at Zoro, sweeping his gaze from top to bottom, clearly not taking him seriously at all. Zoro. Nappa laughed heartily, stepped forward, and raised his hand to pat Zoro on the shoulder. You came at the perfect time. He pulled his hand back and put his hands on his hips. That trash Raditz is dead. He was killed by that Namekian. Nappa pointed at Piccolo in the distance, a gloating smile on his face. Oh, is that so? Zoro's mouth turned up slightly, feigning surprise as he raised an eyebrow. Now I order you. Nappa pointed at Piccolo, issuing commands to Zoro with an unquestionable tone. Go over there and beat that Namekian and his 2 companions to a pulp. If you don't listen, I don't mind beating the shit out of you. Combat power of 1000. Vegeta smiled contemptuously, crossing his arms and lifting his chin higher. Trash will always be trash. After so many years, his combat power has only increased by this much. Zoro's face darkened, and the corner of his eye twitched. Vegeta, you really know how to talk. Wait until you see how I fix you later. Seeing Zoro with a dark face and not speaking, Vegeta didn't care at all and added, but it's fine. Although you are a low-class warrior, if your combat power increases by another 500, you will be comparable to that high-class warrior Raditz. Go on, Zoro. Nappa patted Zoro on the shoulder again, grinning, I have high hopes for you. Don't you dare try any tricks, otherwise you know what the consequences will be. A bright smile appeared on Zoro's face. He tilted his head, suddenly reached out, and grabbed Nappa's wrist. Nappa was taken aback for a moment, looking down at his grabbed wrist, but didn't think much of it. He thought Zoro was just trying to be friendly and greet him. But the next moment, Nappa felt something was wrong. Zoro's fingers locked onto his wrist like iron pincers, the force increasing. Nappa's smile froze. Zoro applied a little force and gently twisted Nappa's arm. Snap. Accompanied by a crisp sound, Nappa's arm snapped right in the middle, as if it were a broken yam. The sound of bones shattering was exceptionally clear in the empty wasteland. It was so fast that Nappa didn't even have time to react. He hadn't even had time to feel the pain, just staring blankly at his arm bent at a strange angle in the middle. Nappa was still a bit dazed, suddenly seeing the wrist in Zoro's hand, and hearing that crisp sound. At the fracture, white bone fragments pierced through the skin, exposed to the air. Immediately after, Nappa felt a heart-wrenching pain. Ah! Nappa let out a pig-like shriek. He bent over, clutching his broken arm with his other hand, his whole body trembling violently. PFF'd. Blood sprayed wildly from the broken arm, splattering onto the ground and staining a patch of soil red. Nappa's face turned deathly pale in an instant, his lips trembling. What? Vegeta's eyes widened, his pupils shrinking. He looked at such a shocking scene in disbelief, the contempt on his face wiped away. Then, Vegeta took a deep look at Zoro again. This kid. His combat power is only 1000. How was Nappa's arm ripped off by him? Vegeta frowned, feeling it was inconceivable. His gaze swept back and forth over Zoro, trying to spot any flaws. Huh, Nappa. Zoro feigned panic, eyes wide, his tone full of innocence. Why did your arm fall off? He looked down at the severed arm in his hand, then at Nappa's bleeding wound. How did this happen? Come, let me put it back on for you. Saying this, Zoro stepped forward, grabbed Nappa's severed arm, aimed it at the wound, and shoved it in with force. The cross-section of the severed arm rubbed against the wound, making a teeth-grinding sound. Ah! Nappa let out another shrill scream, his body curling up like a shrimp. Afterward, he raised his head and cursed at Zoro. You fool, I won't let you get away with this. It's your arm that was too brittle, you blame me. Zoro shook his head, feigning an innocent look, and even shrugged his hands. I'm going to kill you. Nappa shrieked, his eyes bloodshot, as he lunged toward Zoro, claws bared. He had lost his balance, and blood was still flowing from his severed arm, but his furious aura grew even more violent. Zoro curled the corners of his mouth upward. The moment Nappa lunged over, he flickered and vanished from the spot. Swish! In just an instant, Zoro appeared behind Nappa. He didn't even look back. Bang! Zoro kicked out, his foot landing solidly in the center of Nappa's back. Nappa performed a textbook face plant, his entire face burying into the dirt, getting a mouthful of soil, and he lay on the ground, unable to get up for a long time. So fast. Vegeta's pupils constricted slightly, and a trace of surprise finally appeared on his face. Is this the strength displayed by someone with a combat power of 1000? What exactly happened to Zoro? Seeing this scene, Piccolo, Krillin, and Gohan were momentarily stunned. Krillin's mouth hung open, his eyes wide. Gohan peeked out from behind Piccolo, his small face filled with confusion. They were actually fighting. This new Saiyan wasn't their ally. Great. Krillin was both surprised and delighted, clenching his fist and swinging it in front of him. This is perfect, we can just wait for Goku to arrive. Piccolo nodded slightly, arms crossed, his gaze fixed on Zoro's back. He also felt that things were moving in a good direction. Is this new guy really that strong? Krillin was puzzled again, tilting his head with a frown. His energy feels clearly not that strong. His energy is indeed like that on the surface. Piccolo nodded gently, his voice low. It's not even close to that Saiyan named Nappa. He paused, his gaze becoming deep. But for some reason, he gives off a very confident feeling. As he spoke, Piccolo silently wiped his sweat, feeling a bit ashamed. He had previously said this person wasn't as good as Raditz. Turns out, he was even stronger than Nappa. Krillin scratched his head, letting out an, oh, as if he understood. Regardless, Krillin let out a long sigh of relief, wiping the sweat from his forehead. It seems we're saved, now we just wait for Goku to come. Whether the other party is a friend or foe is still an unknown. Piccolo looked deeply in Zoro's direction. But having said that, Krillin scratched his head and looked around. Why hasn't Goku arrived yet? Nappa endured the pain of his severed arm and gritted his teeth as he climbed up from the ground. He turned around, looking at Zoro, his eyes filled with a mix of terror and anger. How? Nappa panted heavily, his voice trembling. When did he run behind me? He looked back at the footprints on the ground behind him, then looked at Zoro. Veins popped on his forehead as he roared, you fool, I won't let you get away with this. Zoro tilted his head, a bright smile spreading across his lips. Don't say that, Nappa. Actually, I've always admired you. He stepped forward and reached out, pointing at Nappa's chest from a distance. After all, you are an elite warrior of a Saiyans, far surpassing upper-class warriors like Raditz, and certainly not something a low-class warrior like me can compare to. Zoro's tone was unbelievably sincere. My admiration for you is like the endless waters of the Yangtze River, and like the flooding of the Yellow River, unstoppable. Nappa's face was livid, his expression becoming increasingly ugly, veins popping on his temples, his only remaining hand clenched into a fist, his knuckles cracking. Everything Zoro said was simply a huge mockery to Nappa right now. You fool. You ripped off one of my arms, and you still have the nerve to say you admire me. Shut up. Nappa was furious, shouting sternly. However, it didn't matter that Nappa was angry. Fresh red blood sprayed out from his severed arm again. Ha ha ha. Zoro laughed out loud, pointing at Nappa's severed arm. The way your arm is spraying blood looks just like a fountain. I won't let you get away with this. Nappa was exasperated, gritting his teeth, and directly unleashed all the energy in his body. A violent aura surged from within him, blowing the rubble on the ground rolling everywhere. His only remaining arm pulled back, his legs kicked off the ground fiercely, and he rushed toward Zoro again. Zoro stood in place, motionless, merely extending his right hand and holding up one finger. Nappa's fist smashed over. Zoro's finger flicked gently, and the fist flew past his face. Nappa's left fist swept horizontally. Zoro's finger pressed down, and the wind from the punch grazed over his head. Nappa kicked with his leg. Zoro's finger pointed forward, hitting the shinbone, and Nappa's leg bounced back. Nappa fought for a long time, his punches and kicks raining down, but he found that Zoro had blocked them all using just one finger. His expression changed from anger to shock, and then from shock to fear. Nappa hurriedly jumped back, putting some distance between them. You. Nappa was stunned, his lips trembling, unable to react. He looked down at his own unscathed fist, then looked at Zoro's upright finger. One finger. He only used one finger. Not bad. Zoro wore a bright smile, retracted his finger, and waved it in front of him. The speed just now was quite fast. Vegeta. Nappa turned his head to ask Vegeta, his voice trembling, what exactly is this guy's combat power? 1000. Vegeta's face was dark, his voice low, his gaze fixed tightly on Zoro. What did you say? Nappa exclaimed, his eyes almost popping out. Is the combat power really only 1000? That's impossible. That's absolutely impossible. HMPH. Vegeta snorted coldly, gritting his teeth as he ripped the scouter off his eye and threw it onto the ground. The scouter landed on the ground, bounced twice, the screen flickered, and then went dark. It's possible this guy has some special skill. Vegeta's voice squeezed out from between his teeth. It's also possible that, like these Earthlings, he can control his combat power at will, and it just didn't show up on the scouter. You've been attacking me for a while now. Zoro curled the corners of his mouth upward, forming a shallow arc, a hint of playfulness flashing in his eyes. Now, is it my turn to attack? What did you say? Nappa was so angry he laughed, looking up and roaring crazily, his laughter filled with a hint of hysteria. You said you want to attack me. Swish. Zoro flashed, his figure vanishing from the spot with a soft sound in the air. In an instant, Zoro appeared directly in front of Nappa. The speed was incredible. So fast that Nappa didn't even have time to react. Before his pupils could even contract, Zoro's fist had already arrived. Bang! Zoro threw an uppercut, his fist landing solidly on Nappa's abdomen. The force of the punch penetrated Nappa's body, sending a shockwave out from his back. Ah! Nappa let out a shrill scream, grimacing in pain as his body curled up like a shrimp, a trickle of blood spilling from the corner of his mouth. Zoro slowly raised his foot and delivered a magnificent side kick, his soul printing onto Nappa's chest. Boom! Nappa's body instantly flew out like a cannonball, tearing through the air with a sharp whistling sound, tracing an arc across the sky before slamming heavily into a cliff in the distance. The cliff instantly shattered, debris flying everywhere amidst a cloud of dust. Countless rocks peeled off the cliff, rumbling down and burying Nappa underneath. The dust settled. Nappa lay on the ground, covered by a few rocks. He looked up blankly at the blue sky, unable to process what had just happened. The intense pain from his severed arm also sapped Nappa's spirit. What's going on? Why can't I even beat a low-class warrior? His combat power is only 1000. Just as Nappa was starting to question his existence, Zoro flew over rapidly. His feet landed on Nappa's chest. Zoro looked down at Nappa beneath his feet and grinned. Off you go. Zoro kicked back with his left foot, using Nappa's body as a skateboard, pushing aside the falling rocks and flying straight out. Debris splashed to both sides, and a long trail of dust dragged out behind him. Piccolo. Krillin. Both men opened their mouths wide, their eyes bulging. Gohan also rubbed his eyes, looking at Zoro with a stunned expression. Can you really use someone as a skateboard? Krillin's mouth twitched, and he turned to look at Piccolo, who happened to be looking at him as well. The two exchanged a look, both seeing the same thought in the other's eyes. Does this Saiyan have something wrong with his brain? Nappa was furious, his chest heaving violently. I won't spare you. He suddenly opened his mouth, a blinding light gathering deep in his throat. Energy gathered and compressed in his mouth, making a sizzling sound. Nappa intended to unleash a mouth blast to hit Zoro. However, just as Nappa's blast was fully formed and ready to be released, Zoro stepped forward without any rush. He didn't even speed up, taking a step as if he were just out for a stroll. One foot stepped directly onto Nappa's mouth. PFF'd. Nappa's blast hit the sole of Zoro's shoe and exploded inside his mouth, with flames shooting out from the corners of his mouth, nostrils, and ears simultaneously. Smoke was coming out of all 7 orifices. The scene was nothing short of spectacular. Even Zoro couldn't help but laugh when he saw it. Nappa. Zoro looked at Nappa with a smile, his eyes curving into crescents. I usually don't laugh, unless I can't help it. Nappa felt like he was falling apart. He spat out a mouthful of black smoke, lost several teeth, and glared at Zoro, his eyes splitting with rage. That look wished he could tear Zoro apart alive. Zoro smiled even more brightly and continued to use Nappa as a skateboard, grinding him hard against the ground. Nappa's back dragged a long trail of blood across the ground, with rocks and gravel embedding into his skin. Nappa was shaking with rage, but he had absolutely no way to deal with Zoro. His only remaining hand grabbed wildly at the ground, but he couldn't grasp anything. Hey, you guys, Zoro skated for a while longer, then suddenly turned to look at Piccolo and the others, a warm smile on his face. Do you want to have some fun? The 3 of them were startled. Piccolo instinctively took half a step back, a drop of cold sweat appearing on his forehead. Krillin's legs went weak, and he nearly sat on the ground. Gohan hid directly behind Piccolo, revealing only half his head. They looked at Zoro as if he were a demon. Although it was satisfying to see Nappa beaten up like this. But this person seemed quite evil too. And he wants us to play. How can we play? Krillin swallowed, squeezed out a smile uglier than crying, and waved his hands repeatedly. Enough. Vegeta could no longer hold back and shouted angrily. You want to play? Zoro tilted his head, looked at Vegeta, and a smile curled at the corners of his mouth. Prince Vegeta. He stomped down hard with his left foot, stepping on Nappa's lower abdomen. Awoo. Nappa let out a howl of agony, his body arching into a U shape, his only remaining hand covering his crotch. Creak. The next moment, under Zoro's control, Nappa slid forward another dozen meters, leaving a long trail of blood on the ground before finally slowing to a stop. Here you go. Zoro kicked Nappa, his soul printing onto Nappa's waist. Nappa's body traced an arc in the air, tumbled a few times, and landed heavily beside Vegeta. He lay on the ground, covered in blood, with the wound from his severed arm still oozing blood. Ah, 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 ah. Nappa reached out his hand in despair, looking at Vegeta for help, his fingers clawing marks into the ground. Vegeta narrowed his eyes at Zoro, then looked coldly at Nappa. There was no expression on his face, and his eyes even held a hint of disgust. Save me. Nappa felt as if his whole body had fallen apart, the intense pain forcing him to beg Vegeta for help. Vegeta. Vegeta didn't even bother to pay attention to Nappa. His gaze passed over Nappa, only narrowing his eyes to watch Zoro. Not bad, Zoro, Vegeta smiled lightly, a dangerous curve forming at the corner of his mouth. A low-class warrior like you actually defeated Nappa, who is an elite warrior. I really underestimated you. You flatter me, Zoro smiled, then brushed the dust off his shoes. It seems your strength has grown quite a bit over the years, Vegeta snorted, his gaze sweeping over Zoro. Had I known, I shouldn't have abandoned you back then. You might have been of some use. You have the nerve to say that. Zoro shouted angrily, his brows knitted together, fists clenched. You shameless guys dumped me on that planet. Leaving me all alone to keep company with 100 cat-eared beauties. Spending every day doing nothing but seeking pleasure. His voice grew louder and louder. Just thinking about it makes me angry. I'm going to make you pay in blood. Vegeta. Vegeta's mouth twitched. Why do I feel like you look very angry, yet also very excited? Nappa bared his teeth, trembling with rage from head to toe. He had originally thought that planet had no resources, but it turned out this kid was living so well there. Are you saying this on purpose just to anger us? Although Saiyans didn't have much interest in beauties or things of that nature, hearing the scene Zoro described. Actually, thinking about it carefully, it was quite interesting. A complex emotion flashed in Nappa's eyes. Krillin looked up at Piccolo, then looked at Gohan. As it turned out, both of their expressions were very calm, as if they couldn't grasp the true meaning of what Zoro had said. Piccolo. Krillin couldn't help it anymore and whispered to Piccolo in a very low voice, "Why do I get the feeling that this Saiyan named Zoro seems to have been dumped by Vegeta and the others on a really nice planet?" "What do you know?" Piccolo snapped, glaring at Krillin. "For a warrior, that is simply the greatest humiliation." Krillin shrank his neck, touched his two index fingers together, and muttered softly, "100 cat-eared beauties. If only that were me." Piccolo glanced at Krillin, his mouth twitching, speechless for a moment. "Is now really the time to be talking about cat-eared beauties? Although I don't know how you managed to raise your combat power," Vegeta scoffed, stepping forward, his feet leaving two deep footprints in the ground. "Your guts are truly not small, Zoro." He tilted his head, his gaze like a blade. "Today, let me properly fix you up and let you know just how terrifying the consequences of provoking me are. Come on then." Zoro's lips curled up slightly, revealing a set of white teeth, and he stood there calmly. He didn't even adopt a fighting stance, his hands hanging casually at his sides. "You will regret this." Vegeta smiled contemptuously, a flash of cold light in his eyes. "Do you think I don't know you've been hiding your combat power?" "I really haven't been hiding my combat power," Zoro said with a smile, his tone relaxed. "I can't be bothered to waste any more breath on you." Vegeta's eyes sharpened, his body sank slightly, and he spread his legs to shoulder width apart. "You will regret this immediately." He crossed his arms in front of his chest, and his ki began to churn within his body. A violent aura rose from his body, blowing the gravel on the ground in all directions. Vegeta immediately adopted a fighting stance. Zoro, meanwhile, remained with his arms crossed, watching Vegeta nonchalantly, without any expression of nervousness on his face. "What?" Vegeta was furious, his brows knitting together. "What kind of attitude is that? Do you intend to fight me in that posture? Come at me." Zoro chuckled, even putting one hand into his pocket. "I'll just stand here and let you hit me. I absolutely won't fight back." Insolent. Vegeta was genuinely enraged, bellowing with a voice that carried a wave of furious energy. He kicked off the ground fiercely, causing two deep pits to explode beneath his feet. Vegeta's figure turned into a blur, rushing rapidly toward Zoro's location. "That short guy is finally making a move." Krillin's voice was low, his eyes tightly tracking Vegeta's afterimage. "Short guy." Gohan muttered softly, tilting his head to look at Krillin. "Uncle Krillin, he is taller than you." "You, what did you say?" Krillin's face turned black on the spot, and he turned his head to glare fiercely at Gohan. I didn't say anything." Gohan quickly covered his mouth and shrank behind Piccolo. It must be said that Zoro using Nappa as a skateboard earlier had indeed made the atmosphere at the scene much more cheerful. Gohan no longer felt as terrified as he had before. This Saiyan named Zoro is indeed very bizarre. Piccolo crossed his arms, his gaze fixed on Zoro's back. His energy level certainly doesn't look as high as Raditz's, yet he somehow managed to rub Nappa into the ground. He paused, his brows furrowed tightly. It feels somewhat inconceivable. At this moment, Vegeta was rushing toward Zoro at extreme speed. His speed was more than double that of Nappa, his figure pulling a string of afterimages through the air. The ground exploded into a straight line behind him, with gravel and dust flying everywhere. Zoro watched the rushing Vegeta, calmly spitting out 3 words. Flash technique. Suddenly, a blinding burst of light erupted from Zoro's body. The light was several times brighter than the sun, instantly illuminating the entire land. Everything on the wasteland was swallowed by the white light, and even shadows disappeared. Vegeta, who had just rushed up, couldn't help but shrink his pupils. A vast white world appeared before his eyes, and he couldn't see anything. His charge came to an abrupt halt, his body surging forward 2 steps due to momentum, and then he stopped. Piccolo, Krillin, and Gohan, who were looking toward this side, were also unfortunately hit by it. The eyes of all 3 went white at the same time, and they immediately closed their eyes. Nappa also felt his vision go white, and then he couldn't see anything, crawling on the ground and groping around blindly. Was that solar flare just now? Krillin rubbed his eyes and exclaimed, his eye sockets still brimming with tears. Isn't the Tien Shinhan's signature move? Piccolo also had his eyes closed, his voice low, his eyelids still twitching. How does this guy know it? It feels a bit different from Tien Shinhan's solar flare. Krillin replied, blinking desperately, trying to recover his vision. After Vegeta's eyes went white, he immediately covered his head with his arms, crouched down slightly, and assumed a defensive stance. His ears twitched slightly, catching every little sound in the surroundings. However, Vegeta waited for a moment, but Zoro did not attack. After about 3 to 5 seconds, Vegeta's vision finally began to slowly recover. He lowered his arms, blinked a few times, and his field of vision went from blurry to clear. Ah! Zoro grinned, tilting his head to look at Vegeta, eyes finally recovered. Vegeta was exasperated, veins bulging on his forehead. How dare you flash my eyes, I won't forgive you. He threw a punch, his ki condensing on his fist, and struck fiercely toward Zoro. Flash technique. Zoro unhurriedly used the flash technique again. The white light bloomed once more. Ah! My eyes! Vegeta exclaimed once again, his fist frozen in midair, and he stood there completely rigid. Piccolo and the others were also unfortunately hit, immediately speechless. Didn't he just use solar flare? He can use it consecutively. Nappa's pupils contracted violently, his vision a vast white scene. Zoro took a step forward. Snap! Only a crisp sound was heard coming from under Zoro's feet. Ah! You stepped on my hand. Nappa exclaimed, screaming in excruciating pain. Sorry about that, I did it on purpose. Zoro chuckled. Nappa's eyes were wide with rage, and he gnashed his teeth incessantly. His teeth chattered as he bit down, and his only remaining hand clenched into a fist, his nails digging into his palm. This guy is so infuriating. I know you might have done it on purpose, but you don't have to say it out loud. By stating it so bluntly, you're making me lose face. The intense pain left Nappa's mind blank, his vision flickering between black and white, his body convulsing uncontrollably. Vegeta gritted his teeth, trembling with rage, the veins on his forehead bulging one by one. His vision gradually recovered, shifting from blurry to clear. The moment he saw Zoro clearly, Vegeta's pupils constricted slightly, and he suddenly had a bad premonition. Could it be, is he going to flash technique? Zoro chuckled, revealing a mouthful of pearly white teeth. White light erupted instantly. Without the slightest hesitation, Vegeta instinctively closed his eyes. At the same time, he raised his right hand, condensing an energy blast in his palm. The ball of light pulsed in his palm, emitting a sizzling sound. Vegeta hurled the energy blast in Zoro's direction. Zoro didn't dodge or evade, he simply raised his hand and slapped it away. His palm connected with the energy blast, swatting it directly back at Vegeta. Whoosh! The energy blast slammed toward Vegeta at incredible speed, leaving a trail of light in the air. Boom! The energy blast grazed Vegeta's shoulder and struck the ground nearby, causing a massive explosion. Fire soared into the sky, debris splattered in all directions, and a deep crater was blasted into the ground. Vegeta was furious, he clenched his right fist tightly, a layer of aura condensing around it. He pushed off the ground with his feet, his figure turning into a streak of light as he rushed toward Zoro at extreme speed. Flash technique. Zoro wore a brilliant smile as he used the flash technique again. White light erupted once more, illuminating the entire wasteland. This skill is just too satisfying. Not only is it instantaneous, but there's also no cooldown. It can be used infinitely without consuming anything. Poor Vegeta, having just rushed over, fell victim to it again. A vast, white world appeared before his eyes, and he couldn't see anything. His charge came to an abrupt halt, his body stumbling forward 2 steps due to momentum. Vegeta trembled even more violently with rage, his expression looking absolutely atrocious. Continuous flash technique. Zoro simply stood beside Vegeta and kept unleashing the flash technique. Waves of white light surged out like the tide. An astonishing scene unfolded. With Zoro at the center, blinding white light erupted from where he stood. The light was several times brighter than the sun, leaving anyone who glanced at it with blinded vision. You could say that Zoro was currently like a sun, only he didn't emit any heat. Everyone on the scene who was watching Zoro unfortunately fell victim to it. No one expected this guy Zoro to be so shameless. To actually use the flash technique continuously. Because Zoro was relatively close to Vegeta, the damage to Vegeta's eyes was even greater. At this moment, Vegeta felt like his eyes were going blind, seeing nothing but a vast, white world. His eyelids blinked desperately, tears streaming out uncontrollably. Nappa had it even worse, suffering both physical and magical damage. He lay on the ground, blood still seeping from his severed arm, and with his eyes unable to open due to the harsh white light, he curled into a ball like a worm that had been stepped on. Piccolo and the others were a bit further away, so they suffered slightly less damage. Even so, the blinding white light made it impossible for them to open their eyes. Piccolo raised his hand to shield his eyes, his brows knitted together. Krillin turned around, facing his back toward the white light. Gohan lowered his head and closed his eyes. Ah! Vegeta, beside himself with rage, let out a roar from his throat. Powerful energy suddenly erupted from his body. Endless energy spread wildly from Vegeta's body, covering the surrounding area. Shockwaves rolled out, the ground cracked, and debris was sent flying into the air. Zoro didn't even bother to dodge the bit of energy Vegeta released. He stood where he was, hands in his pockets, easily tanking it with his body. After all, Zoro's current combat power was 50,000, while Vegeta's maximum combat power was only 18,000. The gap was not just a little bit. Nappa, however, let out a scream. Vegeta's indiscriminate attack hit him squarely, and the energy shockwave slammed into him, leaving him in agony. His body rolled on the ground a few times, a trace of blood spilling from the corner of his mouth. Quick, let's get further away. Piccolo called out, then grabbed Gohan's wrist and dragged him as they sprinted away. Wait for me, take me with you. Krillin panicked and hurriedly followed, his hands fumbling blindly in front of him. I'm over here, you're going the wrong way. Piccolo, sensing his energy, realized Krillin was heading in the wrong direction, his mouth twitching as he corrected him urgently. Krillin embarrassedly turned around and chased after Piccolo's energy signature. None of the three could see right now and had to rely on their instincts to move. Stumbling along, they tripped and faltered. After releasing his indiscriminate attack, Vegeta cautiously opened his eyes. Then, the blinding light rushed at him once more. The white light flooded directly into his pupils. Vegeta's mouth twitched, his entire face twisting. This time, Vegeta was truly on the verge of tears. His eyes, which had just recovered a tiny bit of vision, were once again filled with a vast, white world. Zoro just stood across from Vegeta, incessantly releasing the flash technique. Wave after wave, never stopping. The area within a kilometer was dyed white by the flash technique Zoro released. The light shrouded the entire wasteland, and even the sky was turned white. The lookout. Kami. Mr. Popo rubbed his eye sockets red, tears flowing uncontrollably. He silently wiped sweat with a handkerchief, then wiped away his tears. Kami was also rubbing his eyes incessantly. His eyelids were swollen and red, with tears hanging from the corners of his eyes. The coverage of this flash technique was too vast, causing Kami and Popo, who possessed the ability of clairvoyance, to unfortunately fall victim to it as well. Fortunately, they were quite far away, so the damage wasn't as great, but they still couldn't stop the tears from falling. This, Kami. Mr. Popo asked hesitantly, his voice tinged with helplessness, who is this guy? It looks like he's also a Saiyan. Kami hurriedly withdrew his gaze, sighed, and raised a hand to rub his temples. I reckon he has a grudge against Vegeta and the others. Just how deep is this grudge? Mr. Popo said, between laughter and tears, wiping his eyes again, to make it so people can't even open their eyes. However, having said that, Kami let out a long sigh of relief, his gaze becoming deep and thoughtful. This person's energy does not feel very evil. I hope he belongs to the side of justice. By the way, Lord Kami, Mr. Popo asked hurriedly, what about Goku? Has Goku returned? Hearing Mr. Popo say this, Kami couldn't help but slap his own forehead. I almost forgot about Goku. Kami frowned, he has already arrived at King Yema's palace, I will go pick him up right away. As Kami spoke, his figure flashed, and he disappeared from the spot in an instant. Lord Kami. Mr. Popo muttered, looking at the spot where Kami had disappeared, whispering to himself, is there still a need for Goku to appear? The other world, King Yema's palace. In just an instant, Kami appeared within the palace. King Yema was sitting behind his desk, holding a brush and writing in a ledger. Lord Kami. Son Goku had already been waiting here for several minutes. He was sitting cross-legged on the ground with his arms crossed. Seeing Kami suddenly appear, he hurriedly rushed forward. Why did you only just arrive? Son Goku scratched his head, his face showing impatience, I've been waiting anxiously. Let's not talk about that. Kami waved his hand, his tone urgent, we need to go back immediately. After Kami finished speaking, he immediately grabbed Son Goku's wrist, and his figure flashed and disappeared. Swish. In the blink of an eye, Kami had brought Son Goku back to the lookout on Earth. Alright, I'm off. Son Goku gave Kami a thumbs up, grinned, and took a few deep breaths, my training is complete. That. Kami started to speak but stopped, his lips moving, but ultimately, he didn't say anything. Son Goku didn't notice those details, he quickly took flight and leapt down from the lookout. When passing by Korin Tower, Master Korin was still crouching on top of the tower, rubbing his eyes. His claws were waving in front of his eyes incessantly, his eye sockets red and swollen, tears streaming down his face. His cat face was full of sorrow. Master Korin. Son Goku immediately stopped in midair, asking curiously, tilting his head to look at Master Korin. I'm here, what's wrong with you? Did you get sand in your eyes? Oh, it's Goku. Master Korin managed to open his eyes, squinting them into slits. You're back so fast. He hurriedly fished out 2 senzu beans from behind his back and tossed them over. These are the last 2 senzu beans, catch them quickly. Plop. Son Goku reached out and grabbed the senzu beans. He looked down at the 2 senzu beans in his palm, then immediately ate one. As the senzu bean entered his stomach, a warm current of energy spread throughout his body. Instantly, the fatigue on Son Goku's body was swept away, and his stamina was restored to its peak state. I'm off, Master Korin. Son Goku thanked him, his body sinking slightly as he prepared to depart immediately. Thanks for the senzu beans. Wait a second, Goku. Master Korin hurriedly called out to stop Son Goku, raising a claw. Son Goku froze for a moment, looked back at Master Korin, and his footsteps halted. Take this with you, Master Korin said, raising a hand to conjure a pair of sunglasses, and immediately tossed them over. The sunglasses flipped a few times in the air, flying steadily towards Son Goku. Son Goku reached out and caught them, holding the sunglasses in his hand, looking them over repeatedly, feeling completely confused. Master Korin. Son Goku felt puzzled, his brows furrowing slightly. Why give me sunglasses? You'll know when you get there. Master Korin wiped his sweat silently, using his claw to wipe his forehead. Although Son Goku didn't understand, he still nodded. He waved goodbye to Master Korin again, then quickly grabbed the sunglasses and continued to dive downward. Flying Nimbus. After descending to a certain altitude, Son Goku immediately shouted out loud. The golden flying nimbus came whistling from afar, cutting through the sky, and landed beneath Son Goku's feet. Son Goku stepped onto the golden flying nimbus, took a deep breath, clenched his right fist, and condensed his energy into his fist. Let's go. Son Goku pointed his hand forward, his gaze firm. The flying nimbus carried Son Goku, flying rapidly in the direction of the battle. The cloud left a golden trail in the air. Zoro was still continuously releasing the flash technique. The white light came in wave after wave, continuous and unending. Vegeta was completely at his wit's end. He stood in place with his eyes closed, his body trembling slightly. Even at this moment, Vegeta was planning to give up resistance. This is too shameless. It's the first time I've seen such a shameless Saiyan. Vegeta squeezed his eyes shut, his eyelids trembling slightly from the effort. He pricked up his ears, catching every little sound around him. The moment he felt his eyes were about to recover, he turned around and ran without the slightest hesitation. His feet stomped hard on the ground, and his body darted forward. Vegeta's speed was extremely fast, his figure leaving a trail of afterimages in the air. However, how could Vegeta's speed possibly be faster than Zoro's? Zoro just flashed a few times, leaving several afterimages in the air, and caught up to Vegeta, appearing silently right in front of him. Vegeta felt he had escaped the area of white light and cautiously opened his eyes. His vision had just recovered, not yet having time to see clearly what was in front of him. Flash technique. Zoro said slowly, a smile on his lips. The white light bloomed once again. Vegeta. Vegeta opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He was instantly on the verge of tears, unfortunately hit by the move again. Then, Zoro circled around Vegeta, releasing the flash technique in a 360-degree, no blind spot manner. The white light surged from all directions, shrouding Vegeta in the center of the radiance. Vegeta felt his mentality completely collapse. His whole body shook violently, like a sieve. Veins bulged on his forehead, his teeth clenched tight, yet he was completely helpless. Zoro. Vegeta gritted his teeth and shouted angrily, his voice filled with uncontrollable rage, if you have the guts, fight me properly. What kind of skill is it to release such a boring technique? Continuous flash technique. Zoro ignored him completely, still continuously releasing the flash technique, the smile on his face becoming even brighter. Vegeta was so angry his heart was about to explode. It felt like a ball of fire was burning in his chest, and his breathing became rapid. He couldn't run, he couldn't hit him, and he couldn't see. Vegeta felt that this was the most miserable thing that had ever happened to him. You just wait. When I can see again, I will definitely tear you apart. Nappa, on the other hand, was lying on the ground like a quail. He buried his face in the dirt, not daring to look at the white light in the sky at all. Taking one look would mean his eyes would be blinded for at least several seconds. This guy Zoro has no martial honor. I've never seen such a shameless Saiyan. Blood was still oozing from Nappa's severed arm, staining the dirt beneath him red. Piccolo, Krillin, and Gohan had already run far away by this time. They stopped on a small hillside, with their backs turned to the white light. Even though they were far away, taking a single look in that direction made their eyes feel very uncomfortable. I never expected that using solar flare to such an extent would have this effect. Piccolo fell into a long, deep contemplation, his voice low. That's not solar flare. Krillin wiped his sweat silently and shook his head. That really isn't solar flare. Solar flare can't be released continuously like that, and it requires sunlight in the sky to work. That's right, Uncle Piccolo. Gohan agreed with Krillin and nodded. He shouted flash technique. And, Krillin sighed, his eyes still red, the light released by solar flare isn't as bright as this flash technique of his. He paused, a thought occurring to him, and added, should we take advantage of this moment to finish off that guy named Nappa? Although he is injured, he should still have plenty of energy left. As Piccolo said this, he couldn't help but look back. As a result, when he looked over, Piccolo's eyes went white again, and he unfortunately fell victim to it. Piccolo silently wiped his sweat, tears spilling from the corners of his eyes, unable to even cry. Krillin opened his mouth, not knowing what to say. Even if you want to finish him off now, you don't even know where he is. Piccolo sighed softly and raised a hand to rub his eyes. Can't we sense his location? Krillin mused, tapping his temple with his finger. As long as we know his general location, if we release a few ultimate moves, we might actually be able to kill him. He is lying in the same spot as before. Piccolo thought about it, felt that Krillin made sense, and nodded slightly. Then let's attack together. I'll join in too. Gohan gritted his teeth, quickly replied, and clenched his small fists. Destructo Disc. Special Beam Cannon. Masenko. The three of them simultaneously turned their backs to the white light and gathered energy. Krillin clasped his hands above his head, and a rapidly rotating energy disc condensed between his palms, emitting a shrill buzzing sound. Piccolo extended 2 fingers to his forehead, and a spiral energy beam condensed at his fingertips, with golden light dancing at the tips. Gohan pushed his palms forward, and a golden energy sphere condensed in his palms, with his aura surging. Then, the three of them made a magnificent turn, closed their eyes, and threw their ultimate moves directly toward the location where Nappa had been. 3 streaks of energy tore through the sky, dragging 3 tails of light in different colors. My! Nappa let out a desperate scream, his voice echoing across the vast wilderness. Boom! The next moment, a massive explosion occurred at Nappa's location. Fire shot up into the sky, smoke and dust filled the air, and gravel splashed in all directions. The ground was blasted into a huge deep crater, with charred soil turned over on the outside. Zoro heard the explosion and glanced in that direction. He saw that Nappa's thigh had been pierced by Piccolo's special beam cannon. The beam left a hole through his leg, and blood gushed out from the wound. Not only that, the Destructo Disc released by Krillin had also sliced Nappa directly in half at the waist. And then there was Gohan's Masenko. The Masenko missed Nappa, flew to a spot on the ground in front of him, and exploded in that area, blasting out a fairly large crater. Nappa's body was cut in 2, the 2 halves twitching incessantly, like 2 dehydrated fish. His eyes were wide open, his mouth opening and closing, but he couldn't make a sound. It was clear he wouldn't survive. It's not like this. It's not like this. Nappa was unwilling to accept this, his remaining hand clawing at the ground a few times, leaving a few finger marks in the dirt. His body twitched a few times, his head lolled to the side, and then he stopped moving. Vegeta. Zoro suddenly asked Vegeta, temporarily stopping the release of the flash technique, his tone casual. How about we take a break? Vegeta's face had turned as black as a coal ball. The corners of his mouth twitched, and his entire face was contorting. You blinded me like this, and now you don't have the energy to release the thing, right? You think you can just say let's rest and we rest. HMPH. Vegeta snorted coldly, his chin slightly raised. Out of energy, aren't you? I don't believe you can keep using this flash technique forever. Then why don't you open your eyes? Zoro asked with a smile, tilting his head to look at Vegeta. Vegeta. He opened his mouth, unable to speak. Vegeta felt a stab in his heart. It felt like his heart had been pierced by something. Try opening your eyes. Zoro looked at Vegeta with interest, his arms crossed over his chest. Didn't you say my energy was exhausted and I couldn't release the flash technique anymore? HMPH. Vegeta snorted coldly and gritted his teeth. If you want me to open my eyes, I'll open them. He quickly opened his eyes and immediately closed them again. His eyelids only opened a slit, and the white light flooded in. However, Vegeta opened his eyes too quickly and didn't discover Zoro's exact location. After all, Vegeta had thrown his scouter onto the ground earlier and hadn't had time to put it back on. Actually, even if he put the scouter on, he couldn't open his eyes, so it was useless. Why did you close them again? Zoro asked with a smile, his tone tinged with teasing. You will regret this. Vegeta considered it seriously, then suddenly sneered. He immediately turned his head to look in Zoro's direction and jerked his eyelids open. It's been 10 minutes already. Vegeta, don't believe you can keep releasing the flash technique. This guy's energy must be exhausted. With such strong light, it would be strange if it didn't consume a massive amount of energy. Sure enough, there was no more white light. A smile appeared on Vegeta's face. Just tell me, do you want to rest or not? Zoro looked at Vegeta with composure, even putting his hands into his trouser pockets. There's no need for that. Vegeta was genuinely infuriated, his chest heaving violently. Since arriving on Earth, he hadn't even had a chance to fight. And yet, he had been blinded by this low-class warrior so badly he couldn't even open his eyes. Is there any Saiyan as shameless as you? If I don't finish you off today, I am not Vegeta. Saying this, Vegeta didn't hesitate any longer and quickly rushed toward Zoro, his figure turning into an afterimage, tearing through the air, and bearing down on Zoro with a violent pressure. You're the one who said not to rest. Zoro was not panicked in the slightest, standing still in place. After saying this, he slowly spat out 3 words again. Flash technique. A new round of magical attacks began once more. The white light bloomed instantly, even more blinding than before. Vegeta had just rushed in front of Zoro when he unfortunately fell victim again, his vision turning completely white. He couldn't see anything in his field of vision, only a vast expanse of white. Vegeta was struck as if by lightning, his body freezing in midair. How does this guy still have the energy to release the flash technique? Didn't he run out of energy? This must be the last attack. I estimate if I hold on for another minute. Yeah, 1 minute at most. He will definitely exhaust all his energy, and then it will be his death day. Vegeta silently calculated the time, gritting his teeth, his body trembling even more violently. Actually, the reason I let you take a half-time break just now, Zoro said suddenly, his tone flat, is because Nappa is probably dead. HMPH. Vegeta snorted coldly, the corner of his mouth twitching. That kind of trash dying is just that, he's dead. I don't need useless Saiyans. He wasn't particularly surprised, though. Nappa was already severely injured. If left alone, the chances of him surviving probably weren't very high. Now that he's dead, so be it. The main problem now is to deal with this guy named Zoro. Oh my. Zoro sighed softly, his tone carrying a hint of feigned worry. I'm almost out of energy, it seems I can't use flash technique anymore. This is really bad. HMPH. Vegeta snorted, lifting his chin even higher. Put away your little tricks. Do you think I'll fall for it? I just won't open my eyes. He kept his eyes squeezed shut, his eyelids trembling slightly from the effort. Don't think I'll be fooled. Are you really not going to open your eyes? Zoro asked with a smile, tilting his head to observe Vegeta's expression. Vegeta simply ignored Zoro. He crossed his arms over his chest, stood in place, and kept his eyes closed. Anyway, you can't do anything to me, your combat power definitely can't break through my defenses. Otherwise, you would have attacked me already. And once you attack me, as long as I catch you, you're dead meat. Vegeta felt immensely proud, and a smile even curled at the corner of his mouth. Even though his eyes hurt terribly and tears were still streaming out. Slap. Just as Vegeta was thinking happy thoughts, Zoro stepped forward and smacked him right in the face. The palm collided with his cheek, producing a crisp sound. Vegeta's head was knocked to the side. He was stunned at first, his pupils constricting. Then, he was filled with rage, the veins on his forehead bulging. You're asking for death. Vegeta shouted and punched towards Zoro. His fist tore through the air, carrying a wave of pressure. Zoro had already dodged, his figure flickering slightly before vanishing from the spot. Vegeta's fist missed, hitting nothing but air. Slap. Zoro slapped him again, hitting the other side of Vegeta's face. The sound was even louder than before. Vegeta's head was knocked to the other side, and 2 red marks appeared on his cheeks. Arg. Vegeta was furious, letting out roars from his throat. He lashed out at the air with punches and kicks, his limbs creating afterimages in the sky. Didn't you say you wouldn't open your eyes? Zoro's voice sounded from diagonally behind Vegeta, his tone relaxed. Whoosh! Vegeta made a magnificent turn, rotating his body 180 degrees. He fired an energy blast from his hand, the ball of light shooting out from his palm. The energy blast shot toward Zoro's position at extreme speed, dragging a tail of light through the air. Zoro reached out, spread his fingers, caught the energy blast released by Vegeta, and hooked his fingers around the edge of the light sphere. Then, he squeezed it gently. Pop! The energy blast exploded in Zoro's hand, sparks spraying out from between his fingers. Ah! Zoro exclaimed, his voice carrying a hint of exaggeration. Afterward, he acted like nothing had happened, hovering in the air with nonchalance. His palm was completely unscathed, not even a layer of skin was broken. He. Vegeta smiled triumphantly, the corners of his mouth curling up. How was that one? He tilted his head, still keeping his eyes closed. Got hit, didn't you? A low-class warrior is a low-class warrior after all. Even if you've sealed my eyes, do you think I can't do anything about you? So, Zoro asked with interest, crossing his arms, can you open your eyes now? Vegeta fell silent, his mouth twitching. The more Zoro said that, the less Vegeta dared to open his eyes. For Vegeta, those white lights had already caused psychological trauma. His eyelids felt as if they were glued shut, unable to be pried open no matter what. HMPH. Vegeta grunted, lifting his chin slightly, and directly changed the subject. You must have been hurt just now, otherwise you wouldn't have cried out. Hurt. Zoro smiled and looked down at his shoes. That doesn't exist, my shoelace just came undone. He bent down and pretended to tie his shoelace. Don't brag. Vegeta expressed deep skepticism. Open your eyes quickly. Zoro smiled even more brightly, his tone carrying a hint of provocation. Vegeta took a breath, his chest puffing out. He clenched his fists tightly, his knuckles cracking. Then he placed his hands in front of his eyes, his fingers propping up his upper and lower eyelids, and pried them open bit by bit, revealing a narrow slit. However, just as Vegeta's eyes opened a tiny bit, his hand was slapped away by Zoro. His hand was knocked down, exposing his eyes without any cover. Then, Vegeta's eyes once again made intimate contact with the white light. The white light poured directly into his pupils. Ah! Vegeta let out a painful wail, his body leaning backward. He once again felt a vast white world before his eyes, unable to see anything. Vegeta was furious, roaring loudly, his voice cracking. The problem was, although his eyes had opened a little bit, he still hadn't discovered where Zoro was. Even because of that momentary white light, his vision had regressed back to square one. With things progressing to this point, the thought of leaving this planet had already arisen in Vegeta's heart. He gritted his teeth, his brow furrowed tightly. It's just that, if he used the remote to call the spaceship over now, the spaceship would definitely be kicked away by this guy Zoro. That's it. His speed isn't as fast as mine. Why don't I just run to a very distant place, and then sneak back to take care of him? Vegeta calculated in his mind, a cold smile curling at the corner of his mouth. At this moment, Son Goku was riding the flying Nimbus, approaching this location at extreme speed. The flying Nimbus left a golden trail in the sky. From afar, Son Goku saw an extremely blinding white light, which looked particularly conspicuous in that area. The white light was like a sun that had fallen to the ground, reflecting the surrounding sky into a white glare. What is that ball of white light? Son Goku scratched his head, feeling it was a bit blinding. He squinted his eyes, trying to see clearly. However, after looking at this ball of white light for just a few seconds, his eyes were stung so badly he couldn't keep them open. Tears even welled up from his eye sockets, streaming down his cheeks. Is it solar flare? Son Goku was a bit perplexed, muttering to himself, how can there be such a strange solar flare? He raised his hand to wipe away his tears and blinked his eyes. Immediately afterward, Son Goku looked down at the sunglasses in his hand, suddenly feeling that Master Korin was so thoughtful. Goku grinned, put on his sunglasses, and adjusted the frames. Then he took a deep breath and looked toward the white light in the distance. However, as he looked, the distance closed and the white light grew brighter and brighter. The sunglasses couldn't block that blinding light at all. Goku couldn't help but cry out in surprise, quickly taking off his glasses and rubbing his eyes incessantly. His eye sockets were beet red, and tears flowed uncontrollably. Bang! The flying Nimbus carried Goku and suddenly crashed into a steep cliff. Gravel splattered everywhere, and dust filled the air. Goku fell from the cliff, his body tumbling in the air a few times. As he neared the ground, Goku immediately adjusted his body, flipped over, and landed steadily. Goku rubbed his bruised body, baring his teeth and grinning. He rubbed his eyes again, forcing a helpless smile onto his face. What's going on? Goku was a bit confused, scratching his head. Are the sunglasses not working? He put the sunglasses back on and looked up at the sun again. The sunlight became soft through the lenses, and it was fine when looking at the sun. Why did his eyes feel so uncomfortable when looking at that ball of white light? Goku couldn't figure it out, frowning. Gohan, Krillin, and Piccolo's energy signatures are all there. Goku rubbed his chin and muttered to himself, the three of them are still alive. As for those two Saiyans, one of their energy signatures disappeared just now, but the other one is still there. He paused and closed his eyes to sense them. I don't know who is fighting that Saiyan. There's a very unfamiliar energy signature that appeared at the scene, but its intensity isn't high. Could it be that this person is fighting them? Goku opened his eyes, a trace of confusion in his gaze. Snap! He jumped back onto the flying nimbus, his feet landing on the golden cloud. Goku took a deep breath and pointed his hand forward. The flying nimbus carried him, flying toward the direction where Zora was. However, this time, Goku didn't dare to look at that shining white light again. He turned his head away, shifting his face to the side, using only his peripheral vision to confirm the direction. The golden flying nimbus streaked across the sky, getting closer and closer to the wasteland shrouded in white light. He was flying along with great enthusiasm. Whoosh! Goku suddenly felt something flash past him. Goku subconsciously turned his head and glanced behind him. Soon, Goku noticed a guy with spiky hair flying away at extreme speed. That person's figure looked like he was fleeing for his life, and his speed was astonishingly fast. What incredible speed! Goku controlled the flying nimbus to stop, looking at the fleeing Vegeta with a face full of surprise. He scratched his head, his brows slightly furrowed. Just when Goku was a bit bewildered. Whoosh! That white, shining light was flying rapidly toward this side. The white light was moving even faster than that person just now. Goku looked back, and his eyes were unfortunately hit. Ah! Goku cried out in surprise, subconsciously raising his hand to cover his eyes. At this moment, Goku's expression changed in fear, and he hurriedly steered the flying nimbus down toward the ground. Goku, over here. Krillin's eyes lit up, and he hurriedly shouted excitedly at Goku, waving his hands frantically. Dad, we're here. Gohan was moved to tears, tears streaming down his cheeks, his small face flushed red. Go pick him up. Piccolo said to Krillin and Gohan, his voice low, his eyes have already been hit. The two didn't hesitate anymore, immediately taking flight and arriving at Goku's side. Krillin. Gohan. Although Goku couldn't see very clearly, he could still sense their energy signatures. He blinked a few times, but his vision was still a blur. Goku, you're finally here. Krillin let out a long sigh of relief, a look of relief appearing on his face. Piccolo also flew over from a distance at this moment, landing gently beside Goku. What on earth happened? Goku asked, rubbing his eyes, unable to laugh or cry, his eyelids still twitching incessantly. What's the deal with that white light? Goku, didn't you put on sunglasses? Krillin pointed to the sunglasses on Goku's forehead, looking confused. How did you still get hit? I don't know what's going on. Goku shook his head, took off the sunglasses to look at them, then put them back on his head. The sunglasses don't work at all. Huh. Krillin scratched his bald head and muttered in thought, even sunglasses don't work. Is this a type of magic attack? What on earth happened? Goku asked hurriedly, his tone full of urgency. Krillin immediately told Goku everything that had happened before, from beginning to end. Starting from when Vegeta and Nappa arrived, to the deaths of Yamcha, Xiaosu, and Tien Shinhan. Krillin's voice grew lower and lower, his fists clenched tight. Yamcha, Xiaosu, Tien Shinhan. Goku felt a wave of grief and indignation, his teeth chattering, his eye sockets turning red. Xiaosu has already died twice. Krillin sighed helplessly and lowered his head. I'm afraid he can't be revived again. Goku was silent for a moment, took a deep breath, and looked toward Nappa's direction again. Nappa actually hadn't died, he was still struggling there. His severed body lay in a pool of blood, his only remaining hand scratching feebly at the ground. However, his condition was terrible. His body had been cut in half at the waist, one arm was broken, and there was an extra hole in his thigh. Fresh blood stained the soil beneath him, and his breathing was weak and rapid. Fortunately, the Saiyans have tenacious vitality. If this had been an ordinary person, they would have kicked the bucket long ago. The Saiyan's vitality is indeed very tenacious. After all, in the original work, Vegeta's heart was pierced by Frieza's beam, and he was still able to speak for quite a while. This guy is actually still alive. Krillin exclaimed in amazement, the corners of his mouth twitching. Piccolo and the others walked over, appearing at Nappa's side. Several people formed a circle, looking down at the mangled body on the ground. Nappa clenched his fists, looking at Goku and the others with a savage expression, his eyes filled with resentment. It shouldn't be like this. You ants. The ones who should be dead are you guys. That Vegeta who came with you. Piccolo smiled gloatingly, the corners of his mouth curling up. He's in a miserable state now. You guys are doomed to lose. That's impossible, that's absolutely impossible. Nappa gritted his teeth and said loudly, his voice trembling from the pain. Vegeta will definitely kill him, and then it will be your doomsday. Bang! Piccolo slammed a palm down, the energy bursting from his palm, directly ending Nappa's life. Nappa's head tilted to one side, his eyes still wide open, his body completely still. Tui. Piccolo spat at Nappa's body, his gaze cold. Trash. Krillin. Son Goku turned his head to ask Krillin, his brows slightly furrowed, are you saying that the Saiyan named Zoro used a skill called flash technique? That's what he said. Krillin nodded gently, arms crossed, and he can even fire it in succession. That's amazing. Son Goku exclaimed, a flash of admiration in his eyes. However, we still don't know if he is a friend or foe. Krillin sighed softly, not daring to look in the direction of that ball of white light in the distance. He should be a friend, right? Gohan guessed, tilting his head to think, after all, he's fighting those two Saiyans. His energy doesn't seem evil. Son Goku smiled slightly, his gaze softening, perhaps he is a good person. He rubbed his fists again, a dry smile appearing at the corner of his mouth. I thought I would have a good fight with them. Should we go over and take a look? Krillin turned his head to look at the blinding white light in the distance, squinting his eyes. Upon looking, Krillin immediately pulled his head back and raised his hand to cover his eyes. It was too blinding. Tears welled up again. Let's go. Piccolo acted decisively, immediately taking off into the air, his feet leaving the ground. We have to know the outcome of the battle. Krillin and Gohan exchanged a glance, then followed him into the air. Son Goku was the last to ascend, and the four of them flew toward the area shrouded in white light. Vegeta increased his speed to the limit, the sound of wind whistling in his ears. He felt that he had already shaken off Zoro. At this point, Vegeta gradually slowed down and slowly opened his eyes. His eyelids lifted bit by bit. It didn't matter that he opened his eyes, Vegeta was blinded by the white light once again. The white light was like a sharp sword, piercing straight into his pupils. Ah! Vegeta let out a cry of surprise, his body stiffening suddenly, as if struck by lightning. He hurriedly closed his eyes, his body swaying a few times in the air. What's going on? Why is this guy still following me? I clearly increased my speed to the limit. Logically, I should have shaken him off. Why can he still keep up? You can't run away, Vegeta. Zoro's voice rang in Vegeta's ear, the sound close at hand, less than a meter behind him. Vegeta's face turned deathly pale instantly, his lips trembling. He was trembling with rage, his fists clenched so tightly they cracked. Say it. Zoro said with a smile, his voice tinged with playfulness. Say, I am trash, and that you will never come to Earth again, and I might consider letting you go. You. Vegeta was furious, his face becoming increasingly ugly, the veins on his forehead bulging one by one. You don't want to say it, right? Zoro smiled even more brightly, his tone light, then let's continue. He paused, and slowly spat out 5 words. Continuous flash technique. The white light surged out wave after wave, drowning Vegeta like a tide. If you have the ability, don't use such shameless tricks. Vegeta raged, his voice filled with uncontrollable fury. Didn't you say I was running out of energy? Zoro looked at Vegeta with interest, tilting his head, that once the energy is exhausted, I wouldn't be able to release the flash technique anymore. Vegeta didn't speak, the corners of his mouth twitching, his teeth clenched tightly. Let me tell you a secret. Zoro grinned, revealing a mouthful of white teeth. I can use this move continuously, it doesn't consume energy at all. Vegeta. The corners of Vegeta's mouth twitched violently, feeling as if the sky had collapsed. Can this move be used continuously? Then how is one supposed to fight? Can't see, can't run. Vegeta felt that coming to Earth this time was a huge mistake. He regretted it deeply. Do you dare to put away your disgusting tricks? Vegeta gritted his back teeth, asking angrily, his voice squeezed out from between his teeth, and fight me properly. No. Zoro shook his head with a smile, arms crossed. Put away the flash technique. Not a chance. Why would he put away such a good skill? Zoro just happened to want to use Vegeta as a lab rat to test it out. to see if continuously releasing the flash technique could make him completely blind. Vegeta didn't say anything, his chest heaving violently, once again feeling extreme heartache and anger. Do you think you can run away? Zoro's voice continued, with a hint of a smile. Your speed doesn't seem to be faster than mine. Trembling, Vegeta was so angry that tears fell, his body shaking more violently, like a sieve. 2 lines of hot tears slid from his tightly closed eyes, streaming down his cheeks. But immediately after, Vegeta was furious and rushed toward Zoro's direction, clawing and kicking. His fists flailed wildly, his legs kicked blindly in the air. However, because he couldn't see, Vegeta just lunged at empty air, his body brushing past Zoro. Bang! Zoro did a backflip, his body turning in midair, and his heel kicked heavily onto Vegeta's head. Awoo! Vegeta let out a miserable scream, the sound echoing in the vast sky. His body fell rapidly from the sky like a stone. Boom! Accompanied by a loud noise, Vegeta crashed into the ground below. A deep pit exploded on the ground, dust filled the air, and gravel splashed in all directions. Vegeta lay at the bottom of the pit, covered in dirt and gravel. Ah! 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 At this moment, Vegeta felt as if his whole body had fallen apart. Every bone was aching, every muscle was twitching. At the same time, Vegeta was extremely shocked. This guy's combat power is clearly only 1000, why could he seriously injure me? Could it be that his combat power has already surpassed mine? Impossible, he is just a low-class warrior. I, Vegeta, am a super genius warrior. How could I be surpassed by a low-class warrior? So, he was releasing the flash technique just now, just to toy with me. He clearly had the ability to beat me. Thinking of this, Vegeta felt even more heartbroken. His heart felt as if it had been grabbed tightly by an invisible hand. 2 lines of hot tears flowed down from the corners of Vegeta's eyes, mixed with mud, leaving 2 tracks on his face. Vegeta cried. He was beaten to tears by Zoro. It was mainly because this battle was too suffocating. Pathetic. Zoro landed beside Vegeta, saying with a look of disappointment, shaking his head, not fun at all. You, what did you say? Vegeta gritted his teeth and climbed up from the ground, his body swaying. He stretched out his hand, groping blindly in front of him. Then, Vegeta slowly opened his eyelids trembling as he lifted them a crack. Flash technique. Zoro released the flash technique again, and the white light bloomed instantly. Ah! Vegeta let out a miserable scream, hurriedly closing his eyes, his body leaning backward. Continuous flash technique. Zoro had a sudden inspiration, approached Vegeta, leaned in front of him, and activated the continuous flash technique, the white light flashing crazily before Vegeta's eyes. Vegeta opened his mouth, his expression unsightly to the extreme. He hurriedly covered his eyes with his hands, his palms pressing tightly against his eyelids. Because at this moment, Vegeta clearly felt that even if he closed his eyes, he was still being affected by the flash technique. His eyelids could not block that blinding light. His eyes felt a series of sharp pains, as if needles were pricking them. This guy's flash technique is too shameless, does closing one's eyes not even work? Zoro was slightly taken aback and raised an eyebrow. This guy actually used his hands to cover his eyes. This means that the flash technique, when output at point-blank range, seems to affect one even with eyes closed. Is this thing really that useful? It's a good thing I kept the flash technique before. It can be said that this skill has already exceeded Zoro's expectations. Seeing Vegeta cover his eyes with his hands, his expression improved significantly, and his brows even relaxed a little. Zoro stepped forward, grabbed Vegeta's wrists, and moved his hands away from his eyes. Vegeta's hands were pried open, revealing his tightly shut eyes. Vegeta. The corners of Vegeta's mouth twitched violently, and his entire face was contorted. This shameless guy. If you keep playing like this, my eyes will go blind very soon. After moving Vegeta's hands away from his eyes, Zoro continued to release the flash technique without stopping. Waves of white light came one after another, never ceasing. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes later. Vegeta lay on the ground with a look of utter hopelessness, his limbs spread out like a corpse. Bright red blood flowed from his eyes, and bloody tears streamed down his temples. He was completely blind now. At this point, Zoro finally stopped releasing the flash technique. The surrounding white light dissipated instantly, and the sky returned to its original color. Afterward, Zoro crouched down and patted Vegeta's cheek. Slap, slap. His palm struck his cheek, making a crisp sound. Hey, Zoro asked, tilting his head to look at Vegeta, are you okay? Prince Vegeta. Vegeta shuddered, the corners of his mouth twitching, his lips trembling. Do I look like I'm okay right now? Vegeta's chest heaved slightly, his breathing rapid and chaotic. The extent of his injuries was even more tragic than when he fought Son Goku and the others in the original plot. After all, that kick from Zoro earlier had been quite forceful. Vegeta felt as if his internal organs had been displaced. Every breath brought sharp pain. Zoro walked over to Vegeta, lowered his head, and looked down at this once arrogant and unyielding Saiyan prince on the ground, a smile curling at the corner of his mouth. Say it. Zoro stepped on Vegeta's chest and said with a smile, you are trash. You will never come to Earth again. Vegeta's body stiffened abruptly. With his chest being stepped on, breathing became even more difficult. His lips trembled a few times, and his teeth clicked together. HMPH. Vegeta was filled with grief and indignation, his voice squeezed out from between his teeth. A warrior can be killed, but not humiliated. Then I will humiliate you properly. Zoro revealed a brilliant smile and tilted his head. How about I throw you into a septic tank? You. Vegeta's expression froze, and his entire face was contorted. His whole body trembled violently, as if he had been electrocuted. His complexion was unsightly to the extreme, a pale color tinted with a livid blue. Are you a devil? If you have the guts, kill me. Vegeta was furious, letting out a low roar from his throat. Why would I kill you? Zoro laughed, his smile carrying a hint of playfulness. If I kill you, how will I punish you later? I just like the way you look at me with annoyance, yet you can't do anything about me. Vegeta fell silent. His chest heaved violently, his breathing growing heavier. Bloody tears flowed from his eyes again, dripping onto the ground. Not going to say it, huh? Zoro snorted coldly, putting away his smile. If you don't say it, then I'll throw you into a septic tank and let you soak for a year. As he spoke, he stepped forward directly, bent down, and grabbed Vegeta's tail. Zoro dragged his body forward as he walked. Vegeta's back scraped against the gravel, making a harsh sound. His fingers clawed randomly at the ground, but he couldn't grab anything. Vegeta was suddenly terrified. If he really were to be thrown into a septic tank and soaked for a year, that would be worse than dying. But, should he just die like this? Vegeta was unwilling. Because Vegeta's greatest dream was to become a Super Saiyan. That was his obsession since childhood, the meaning of his existence. He hadn't become a Super Saiyan yet, how could he die? Vegeta, must absolutely not die on Earth. I'll say it. Vegeta panicked. He was panicked. His voice carried a hint of panic. Zoro paused slightly, stopped his hand that was dragging the tail, and looked back at Vegeta. I will never come to Earth again. Vegeta gritted his teeth and said, full of unwillingness, every word seemed to be squeezed out from his throat. There's one more sentence. Zoro looked at Vegeta with a smile, his eyes full of anticipation. I. Vegeta's lips trembled violently, and his whole face was twitching. I am trash. When saying this, Vegeta shed 2 lines of bloody tears in grief and indignation. Drops of blood slid from the corners of his eyes, dripping into the soil beneath him. Just you wait, Zoro. I will definitely make you pay. When I, Vegeta, become a Super Saiyan, I will come back for you. By that time, your flash technique will be nothing but a decoration in front of a Super Saiyan. Also, if I can leave Earth, when I return, I must think of a way to research something to resist his flash technique. Vegeta had already begun to think in his mind about how to crack the flash technique. His brows were furrowed tightly, and his teeth clicked together. Louder. Zoro looked unhappy and frowned. Say the whole thing. I am trash. I will never come to Earth again. Vegeta felt even more immense humiliation, his face covered in bloody tears. The voice echoed across the empty wasteland, carrying an irrepressible grief and indignation. Just at this moment, Son Goku, Piccolo, Krillin, and Gohan descended from the sky and landed beside Zoro. Just now, the words Zoro made Vegeta say, that he was trash and would never come to Earth again, happened to be heard by Son Goku and the others. Son Goku and the others were all stunned. Their eyes were wide open, their mouths slightly agape, and they looked over with expressions of astonishment. When they saw Vegeta's miserable state, Son Goku and the others were once again deeply amazed. How pitiful. His eyes had actually been blinded by the flash. Blood was still seeping from his eye sockets. Can the flash technique really blind someone's eyes? Solar flare couldn't do that. Son Goku scratched his head, opened his mouth, and didn't know what to say. Krillin swallowed his saliva and subconsciously took half a step back. Piccolo crossed his arms, looked expressionlessly at Vegeta on the ground, his eyes carrying a hint of complex emotion. Gohan hid behind Piccolo, poking out half his head, his little face full of shock. It's almost the end of the month, guys, throw your monthly tickets over here. It is said that for every 7 people who cast a monthly ticket, you can have any wish granted. I have no interest in you anymore, Zoro said, kicking out again. His foot caught Vegeta in the waist. You can get lost. Bang! Vegeta's body traced an arc through the air, like a kite with a broken string. He tumbled a few times before crashing headfirst into a distant jungle, disappearing into the canopy. The sound of branches snapping echoed from the distance. PFF'd. Vegeta spat out a mouthful of blood, the crimson mist dispersing in the air. He lay prone on the forest floor, covered in mud, with dried blood staining his face. His trembling right hand reached into his chest pocket. After fumbling around with shaking fingers, he pulled out a small remote control. Gritting his teeth, Vegeta felt around and pressed a few buttons on the remote. Whoosh! A spherical spaceship came flying over from the distance at high speed, leaving a white trail behind it. The ship traced an arc in the sky and landed rapidly beside Vegeta, its hatch facing him directly. Hearing the sound, Vegeta fumbled his way toward the spaceship. He clawed at the ground, his fingernails packed with dirt. At the same time, Vegeta's heart hammered against his chest as if it were about to burst out. I hope that guy Zoro hasn't changed his mind. If he kills me at a time like this, I have absolutely no strength to resist. Fortunately, Vegeta felt himself getting closer and closer to the spaceship. His fingers brushed against the smooth outer hull of the ship. Clack! Vegeta reached out, gripping the edge of the spaceship's hatch, his fingers hooked into the gap. He was overjoyed. Finally! I am finally going to board the spaceship. Flash technique. Zoro suddenly shouted from behind. The voice wasn't loud, but it reached Vegeta's ears clearly. Upon hearing Zoro's voice, Vegeta's expression stiffened. His body shuddered violently as a reflex. His fingers slipped, losing their grip on the edge of the hatch. Losing his support, Vegeta face planted into the mud. Son Goku immediately covered his eyes. Krillin let out a cry and turned around. Piccolo instinctively raised his hand to cover his eyes. Gohan closed his eyes immediately. However, Son Goku and the others soon realized what was happening. Because Zoro was just shouting, he hadn't actually used the flash technique. No white light appeared. Son Goku lowered his hand, breathed a sigh of relief, and smiled awkwardly. Krillin also turned back around and patted his chest. That thing is just too terrifying. My eyes can't handle it at all. After falling to the ground, Vegeta suddenly realized that his eyes were already blinded. He lay on the ground, gasping for air. Even if you use the flash technique again, can you cause secondary damage to my eyes? HMPH. Vegeta gritted his teeth in anger, his teeth grinding audibly. He reached out again, fumbling to find the edge of the hatch, and used his strength to push his body up. Finally, Vegeta crawled into the spaceship. He rolled into the cabin and leaned back against the seat. Creak. The spaceship's hatch slowly closed with a dull thud. Whoosh. The ship took off rapidly, its thrusters spewing scorching hot air. It instantly broke through the planet's atmosphere, leaving a white trail in the sky as it entered the vast starry expanse. Feeling that his ship had completely entered outer space, Vegeta finally let out the breath he had been holding. He slumped in his seat, completely drained of energy. Great. I have finally left Earth. Vegeta let out a long breath. Just you wait. Zoro. Once I, Vegeta, become a Super Saiyan, I will return the humiliation of today to you 100-fold. He clenched his fists, his fingernails digging into his palms. On the wasteland, Zoro looked up at Vegeta's disappearing spaceship, the corners of his mouth curling upward into an even brighter smile. The shadow of the ship turned into a speck of light on the horizon before vanishing completely. Zoro wasn't in any rush to kill Vegeta anyway. In fact, Zoro didn't hate Vegeta for leaving him on planet Atlantis. After all, Zoro had spent a pleasant youth on that planet. He had plenty to eat and drink, and 100 cat-eared beauties to keep him company. Life was quite comfortable. The reason he hated Vegeta was simply because that guy had such a foul mouth. If you had just left me there without a word back then, I wouldn't have done these excessive things to you. Besides, when I first arrived, you humiliated me. Of course I had to humiliate you back tenfold. Hello. Son Goku stepped forward to greet him in a friendly manner, a sincere smile on his face as he extended his hand to shake Zoro's. Piccolo's gaze swept back and forth across Zoro, his brow slightly furrowed. Krillin's fists clenched instinctively, his body leaning slightly backward. However, both of them quickly came back to their senses. The two exchanged a glance, seeing the same thought in each other's eyes. If we stare at him this closely, what if he uses the flash technique again? That Saiyan named Vegeta is so pitiful, his eyes were blinded by the flash. Krillin shuddered and quickly looked away. Piccolo also gave a dry cough and looked elsewhere. Wait a second, Zoro said, pulling out a remote control and manipulating it. Whoosh! Zoro's spaceship flew over from the distance and landed steadily nearby. Zoro immediately stepped onto the spaceship and climbed into the cabin. He quickly operated the main console, his fingers dancing rapidly across the buttons. Huh. Son Goku was slightly taken aback and quickly asked, Zoro. Are you leaving Earth? No, Zoro smiled and replied without turning his head. He reached out and picked up the microphone, bringing it to his mouth. Then, Zoro shouted into the microphone on the spaceship. Flash technique. As soon as those 3 words were uttered, Son Goku instinctively closed his eyes, his eyelids snapping shut, his body stiffening slightly. Piccolo, Gohan, and Krillin were startled and hurriedly turned around in a dramatic fashion. Krillin let out an ah and covered his face with his hands. Gohan buried his head directly into Piccolo's cape. Piccolo raised his hand to cover his eyes. However, Zoro still didn't release the flash technique, he was just shouting the slogan. The air was silent for 2 seconds. Krillin slowly lowered his hands, turned around, and looked at Zoro, speechless. Piccolo also lowered his arm, the corner of his mouth twitching. Son Goku opened his eyes, scratched his head, and smiled awkwardly again. The vast starry sky, the boundless universe. Vegeta lay in the spaceship, his face filled with despair and resentment. His eyes were covered in dried blood scabs, and dried blood still stained the corners of his mouth. His body rocked slightly with the gentle turbulence of the spaceship. Just then, Zoro's voice, like a demonic whisper, suddenly came through the speakers. Flash technique. The voice transmitted through the communication line, as clear as if someone were speaking right in his ear. Terrified, Vegeta let out a scream, his body convulsing violently. He flailed his hands wildly, nearly falling off his seat. His heart hammered in his chest, as if it were about to explode. However, Vegeta soon realized something. His movements stopped. What the hell? I've already boarded the spaceship, what else do I have to be afraid of? Zoro, that fool, specifically connected my communication line. Are you trying to humiliate me this way? Vegeta's fists clenched, his knuckles popping. Snap. Vegeta tapped his hand lightly against the speaker. The speaker was crushed to pieces by his palm, fragments scattering inside the cabin. With that, Vegeta, shedding tears of blood, could finally have a peaceful sleep. He leaned back in his seat and closed his eyes. However, as he slept, Vegeta began to have nightmares again. In his dream, Vegeta felt that he was surrounded by white light. A vast, boundless expanse of white. He couldn't see anything. No matter which direction he ran, the white light followed him like a shadow. Ah! Vegeta screamed and woke up from the nightmare. He gasped for breath, his chest heaving violently. His forehead and back were covered in cold sweat, soaking his clothes. His expression was hideous, and his lips were trembling. Zoro. Vegeta was furious, his body shaking even more violently. Vegeta, will never forgive you. Earth. Alright. Zoro stepped down from the spaceship with a faint smile, turning to look at the people present. Hello, Zoro. Son Goku thanked him solemnly. Thank you for driving the Saiyan away. I can tell you don't seem like a bad person. Actually, I am inherently kind. Zoro took a deep breath and sighed. It was all Vegeta and the others forcing me, making me stay on a primitive planet, keeping company with. Forget it, it's all in the past, no need to talk about it. Piccolo, Krillin, Gohan. The 3 of them were speechless, silently complaining in their hearts. You aren't a bad person, but that doesn't mean you are kind. You even beat Vegeta until he cried. And even after he left, you still used the communicator to humiliate him. Krillin's mouth twitched, and he looked away. Piccolo remained expressionless, but the corner of his eye twitched slightly. Gohan tilted his head, looking at Zoro, then at Son Goku, his little face full of confusion. But it's a pity. Son Goku sighed softly, slightly disappointed, and scratched his head. I still wanted to have a good fight with that Saiyan named Vegeta. There will be chances in the future. Zoro smiled. As they were speaking, a huge airship flew over from the distance. The roar of the engines approached, and the shadow of the airship swept across the ground. Ah! It's Ms. Bulma and the others. Krillin smiled and raised his hand to wave at the sky. Bulma is here. Son Goku also looked up at the sky and grinned. The airship landed slowly, the airflow kicking up dust from the ground. Creak. The hatch opened, and white steam gushed out from the gap. Whoosh! A woman rushed out from the airship, fast as a gust of wind. She rushed to Gohan's side at high speed and hugged him tightly. Zoro glanced in the direction of the airship and saw a few familiar faces. They were Bulma, Chi-Chi, Master Roshi, and Master Korin. The one who had just rushed to Gohan was Son Goku's wife, Chi-Chi. Mom. Gohan's mouth twitched slightly, and his body stiffened. Gohan, are you alright? Chi-Chi hurriedly checked Gohan's body, her hands feeling all over him to see if he was injured. I'm fine, Mom. Gohan said with some embarrassment, his face flushing slightly. I wasn't injured. It's so pitiful that you were dragged into this battle. Chi-Chi said in a deep voice, her eyes reddening. I will never let you leave Mom again. Actually, I'm really fine, Mom. Gohan scratched his head and looked at Son Goku for help. Son Goku coughed dryly and looked away. Who is this? Master Roshi stepped forward, watching Zoro vigilantly. He had his hands behind his back, his brows furrowed slightly, and his gaze swept back and forth over Zoro. Grandpa. Son Goku quickly pulled Zoro over and introduced him to everyone with an enthusiastic smile. This is a new friend of ours, and he is also a Saiyan, named Zoro. Zoro. Bulma was slightly stunned and tilted her head. She looked Zoro up and down, her gaze sweeping from his face to his feet and back to his face, revealing a thoughtful expression. Bulma, what's wrong with you? Krillin asked in a low voice, leaning close to Bulma. Don't tell me you're falling for a handsome guy. I feel like I've heard this name somewhere. Bulma mused, tapping her chin with her finger. Maybe it's just a name coincidence. Krillin guessed. I don't know. Bulma's gaze lingered on Zoro for a few seconds. Her eyes suddenly lit up. But just as you said, he is really handsome. Bulma immediately put on a lovesick expression, hands clasped in front of her chest. He is exactly my type. Krillin's mouth twitched, and he looked at Bulma, speechless. Then he looked at Zoro, and then back at Bulma. Finally, he sighed and shook his head. Being handsome really pays off. Bulma seems to have really fallen for him. She has never been like this when seeing a handsome guy before. Krillin coughed dryly, but Bulma didn't even pay attention to him. Hello. Bulma stepped forward, her steps light, a shy smile on her face. She reached out her hand, fingers slightly curled, her voice several degrees lower than usual. I'm Bulma, 18 years old this year. Please take care of me. After saying this, her face flushed slightly, and she lowered her head, glancing up at Zoro. Zoro's face turned dark. I know you are Bulma, but saying you are 18 years old is a bit much. You're 28 this year, right? Zoro's gaze lingered on Bulma's face for a second, his mouth twitching. Hello. Zoro didn't refuse, reaching out to shake Bulma's hand. Originally, Zoro wanted to steal Bulma away and let Vegeta be left alone. But thinking about her age, and what she did in the original story. She's probably already been snatched up by that pig Yamcha, right? Zoro really couldn't muster much interest. I have 100 cat-eared beauties, isn't that better? Zoro just shook her hand out of courtesy and then let go. He pulled his hand away from Bulma's palm, the movement clean and decisive. Bulma was stunned, her lips moving, wanting to say something else. Ms. Bulma. Krillin interrupted at the right moment, his expression becoming heavy. Except for us, everyone else was killed. He sighed softly, lowered his head, and clenched his fists. We can just use the Dragon Ball to revive them in a year. Bulma glared at Krillin, her eyebrows slightly furrowed, her tone filled with impatience. Do you need to tell me about such things separately? Krillin shrank his neck, intimidated by her glare. However, after she finished speaking, Bulma suddenly noticed Zoro looking at her, his gaze fixed upon her. Her expression changed instantly. The corners of her eyes curved down, and her lips pursed into a gentle arc. It's all right. Bulma's voice became soft, as if she were coaxing a child. The Dragon Ball will bring them back to life. Krillin opened his mouth, his eyes wide. This change of face is way too fast. Krillin wiped his sweat silently, the beads of sweat on his forehead reflecting the light. That's not it, Bulma. Krillin asked with a serious expression, his brows furrowed. Hasn't Yamcha always been pursuing you? He died. How come I feel like you aren't sad at all? What are you talking about, Krillin? Bulma said, hands on her hips, speaking angrily to Krillin, her chin slightly lifted. Her voice rose again. Him liking me is his own business. Let me emphasize this again, I don't like him at all. He is not my type. I got it. Krillin scratched his head embarrassedly, rubbing his bald head with his hand. Zoro was slightly taken aback, raised an eyebrow, and looked at Bulma. His gaze lingered on Bulma's face for 2 seconds. Why is this plot different from what I'm familiar with? Could it be that in this timeline, Bulma didn't end up with Yamcha? The corners of Zoro's mouth curled up slightly, then quickly returned to normal. Let's head back first, Master Korine suggested, squatting to one side. Everyone stepped onto the airship together. Footsteps echoed with a thudding sound on the metal gangway. Zoro didn't move, remaining in place, his hands in his pants pockets, his gaze fixed on the distant sky. Zoro. Bulma poked half of her body out from the cabin door, flashing a gentle smile at him. She tilted her head to one side, trying hard to appear like a refined young lady. You should come too. Let's go to our place for a good meal first. We have a lot of delicious food at home. You're just like Goku, you must be a big eater, right? Must also be a big-bellied turtle. Krillin stood behind Bulma, muttering to himself in a low voice. But Bulma still heard it. Bulma. Bulma's face turned black instantly, the veins on her forehead twitching slightly. She glared at Krillin furiously, flames almost shooting out of her eyes. Just a joke, don't be mad. Krillin hurriedly backed away several steps, waving his hands in front of him. Sure, thanks. Zoro nodded and stepped onto the airship. The airship's hatch closed with a dull thud. The roar of the engines grew louder. Whoosh. The next moment, the airship took off immediately, flying toward West City. The scenery outside the window receded rapidly, and the buildings on the ground became smaller and smaller. Below, Yajirobe ran over quickly from a distance, his steps hurried, the fat on his belly wobbling. He waved his arms and shouted loudly, "Hey, wait for me, I haven't boarded the airship yet." His voice echoed across the empty wilderness. However, the people on the airship seemed to have completely forgotten him, no one noticed his presence at all. The airship flew higher and higher, further and further away. Whoosh! The airship accelerated, its tail emitting a blue exhaust flame. Under the setting sun, the airship left a shining trail and disappeared into the horizon. Yajirobe stood in place, bent over, hands on his knees, panting heavily. He raised his head, looking at the direction the airship disappeared, his lips trembling. Those fools. Inside the airship. By the way, Master Korine. Krillin suddenly thought of something and turned to ask, did that guy Yajirobe not come to join the fight? He said he would come. Master Korine mused, stroking his chin with his paw. He paused. Maybe he got hungry on the way and went to find a place to eat. It's better that he didn't come. Krillin sighed and shook his head. If he had come, he probably would have lost his life. The main problem now is. Son Goku rubbed his chin, falling into deep thought, his brows furrowed. Yamcha and Tien Shinhan can both be revived via the Dragon Ball, but what about Xiaosu? Yeah. Krillin nodded sadly, his eyes slightly red. Xiaosu has already died once, there's no way to revive him. This is tricky now. Bulma also sighed, crossing her arms. Zoro. Krillin turned to ask Zoro, did you also come to Earth because you heard about the Dragon Ball? No. Zoro shook his head, smiled slightly, and put his hands in his pockets. I came specifically to deal with Vegeta and Nappa. So that's how it is. Krillin nodded. He paused, then smiled and explained, the Dragon Ball we were just talking about is something very magical on Earth. As long as you collect all 7, you can have any wish granted. I have heard of the Dragon Ball. Zoro said with a smile, his gaze sweeping over everyone present. A long time ago, I saw it in an ancient book on planet Vegeta. It is said to be a unique ability of the Namekians. Namekians. Krillin was stunned and immediately shifted his gaze to Piccolo. Piccolo raised an eyebrow, said nothing, crossed his arms, and remained expressionless. Yes. Zoro also looked at Piccolo and said with a smile, this Piccolo is a Namekian. Piccolo. The corner of Piccolo's eye twitched slightly. I heard that Saiyan named Nappa say that too. Krillin sighed, scratching his bald head, so Piccolo is a Namekian. No wonder you are so powerful. Piccolo remained silent, his gaze shifting to the window. I have basically understood what you were just talking about. Zoro looked around, his gaze sweeping over everyone's face. Before this, were there 3 people who died in battle? Yes, that's right. Son Goku nodded, his expression becoming heavy. This is my fault. Zoro said with a look of self-reproach, sighing, his brows tightly locked, I came to Earth too late. If I had come earlier, they wouldn't have had to die. Hearing Zoro say this, and seeing him act so remorseful, Son Goku and the others were all quite moved. Son Goku's eyes turned slightly red, and his lips moved. Krillin lowered his head and wiped the corners of his eyes with the back of his hand. Although Piccolo was expressionless, his gaze also became a bit softer. Zoro really is a good person. However, Zoro asked, looking at Krillin. From what I gather, it seems like there is one person who cannot be revived. Yes. Krillin's voice was low, his fingers clenched. Shenron cannot revive someone who has already died once. We had a companion named Xiaosu who was killed a long time ago, so there is no way to revive him again. Then go to planet Namek. Zoro said in a calm tone, I heard that planet Namek also has a Shenron. The Shenron there might be able to revive your companion. That's the end of part 1. Part 2 is coming soon.
Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and support our channel for more stories.